Chapter 526. When Lan Feng smiled faintly and watched his ancestor Nan Ming flash to the big house. During this period of recuperation, ancestor Nan Ming and Nongzhu had quarreled countless times because of this communication formation. Although they quarreled, Nongzhu could still do whatever she wanted to do. As soon as he teleported over, he saw Nongzhu jump into the communication formation. From afar, ancestor Nan Ming shouted angrily, "Old Nongzhu, how dare you!" Bai Changchun and ancestor Nan Ming arrived at the same time. The former frowned, while the latter rushed into the transmission formation and stared at Nongzhu. Nongzhu snorted coldly, "My kindness is really unrewarded. I wanted to do it for you when you weren't here, but I had to look at your face." Oomph. She slowly walked out with her hands behind her back. "I've never seen anyone as thick-skinned as you." Ancestor Nan Ming mocked. He did not say much and decided to contact Xian Island first. On the other side, Zi and Hibiscus glanced over at them. After that, they went back to talking about themselves. They were already used to this kind of scene. There was nothing to worry about. After a while, ancestor Nan Ming walked out of the communication formation and looked at Bai Changchun with a hesitant look. Nongzhu, who tilted her head, walked back as if nothing had happened. She coughed and said, "What's the trouble? Why don't you tell us? Is it related to me?" Bai Changchun looked at him and more or less guessed something. Ancestor Nan Ming nodded and said, "Bai Changchun, your disciple Yu Qianqiu might be in trouble." Wen Lanfeng and Nongzhu looked at each other and stared at ancestor Nan Ming at the same time. Bai Changchun opened his eyes slightly and said, "Speak your mind." Grandmaster Nan Ming was silent for a while. Then he slowly repeated the news that came from Xian Island. He told him about how the various countries hunted Yu Qianqiu for his treasure blade, how Yu Qianqiu slaughtered nearly 2,000 cultivators from the various countries outside the Misty Forest, and how he hid in the Misty Forest in the end. In fact, Xian Island had also spread the news that when Lan Feng had come to the Demon Domain to challenge Bai Changchun to a duel. However, ancestor Nan Ming had witnessed the whole thing and knew that everything was fine now. Naturally, there was no need to mention this unpleasant matter. After old ancestor Nan Ming finished speaking, the entire place was silent. Bai Changchun's cold gaze flickered continuously. After Nongzhu came back to her senses, she cried out involuntarily, "Nan Ming, did you hear it wrong? You're saying that Yu Qianqiu single-handedly massacred nearly 2,000 cultivators from various countries? Also, Yu Qianqiu could actually come and go as he pleased in the Misty Forest? How is this possible? It shouldn't be wrong. My disciple said that this matter has already spread like wildfire in the cultivation world." At that time, there were thousands of people who witnessed it. Grandmaster Nan Ming looked at Bai Changchun and said, "Among these 2,000 cultivators, the lowest cultivation level is at the nascent soul realm. Pu Taidong even had 5 disciples at the end of the tribulation passing stage, and they died under Yu Qianqiu's flying sword. Is this kid crazy?" Nongzhu asked in a daze. Wen Lanfeng was also shocked. In his life, he had never killed so many people at once. He glanced at Bai Changchun. Like master, like disciple. They're both cruel and merciless. Grandmaster Nan Ming said in a low voice, "Pu Taidong has personally come out because of the death of his 5 disciples at the end of the tribulation passing stage. The soul-forming realm cultivators of various countries are also restless. Pu Taidong. What a great ability." Bai Changchun said softly. His voice was not loud, but the coldness in his words sent a chill down the 3 spines. The 3 of them looked at each other. If Pu Taidong knew that he had provoked Bai Changchun's disciple, how would he feel? As expected, Bai Changchun said with a cold gaze, "More than 5,000 cultivators are after my disciple. Pu Taidong's disciple is a human, but is my disciple not a human? It seems that the Lord of Jinshan Kingdom has to be changed." He looked back at Grandmaster Nan Ming and said, "Nan Ming, I'll leave the matters here to you for the time being. I'll go to other countries and see how many heads Pu Taidong has grown." The few of them were shocked when they heard this. Was he going to start a massacre? Grandmaster Nan Ming stammered. Then this, "I, Nongzhu frowned and immediately sent a voice transmission to Wenlan Feng. Brother Wen, once this crazy old man goes out, the cultivation world will definitely collapse. Just do as we agreed, please. Bai Changchun. Wenlan Feng took a step forward and said with a smile, "Thank you for showing mercy. You should focus on your own business with Nanming first. You don't need to do it yourself. It's making a mountain out of a molehill if you do it. Although I, Wenlan Feng, am no match for you, I'm confident that I still have some influence in the cultivation world. I'm about to say goodbye to you. I'll go back and take care of your disciple." You? Bai Changchun was startled. Although Wenlan Feng was no match for him, with his cultivation, he would probably have few opponents in the cultivation world. It shouldn't be difficult for him to go out and help them. That's right. Why didn't I think of that? Nongzhu appeared to be suddenly enlightened. She walked over and patted Wenlan Feng's shoulder, saying, "Old Wen, you're right. Sending old Bai out personally is making a mountain out of a molehill. It's best if you go out and warn those soul formation cultivators. Ha ha. Right. Grandmaster Nanming struck while the iron was hot, saying, "Bai Changchun, let's leave this matter to Wenlan Feng. The arrays in Twilight Valley are too complicated. I've almost gotten dizzy several times. I'll have to trouble you to stay and lead the way for me." These words were a little fake. Given Grandmaster Nanming's artificing skills, he had probably memorized the arrays by heart after being led around so many times. It should be known that the more skilled a person was at artificing, the higher their attainments in arrays. Otherwise, he would not have become the world's #1 artificer. Nongzhu immediately shot him a disdainful look. Wasn't this more of a hindrance than a help? The Grandmaster Nanming also realized that he had gone too far and subconsciously shrank back. Bai Changchun was no fool. He glanced at them and understood what they were thinking. He slowly said to Wenlan Feng, "Then I'll have to trouble you." These words immediately made the three sigh in relief. Wenlan Feng's melancholy eyes revealed a hint of a smile, and he cupped his hands, saying goodbye. With that, he disappeared and reappeared in the air, a shadow rapidly tearing through the air. Countless soul formation cultivators had been waiting for him on the road from the demon realm to the Baiwan kingdom. There was no way around it. No one dared to trespass the demon realm, so they could only wait outside. Moreover, this was a place Wenlan Feng had to pass on his way back to the Baiwan kingdom. Of course, the premise was that Wenlan Feng could return alive. Wenlan Feng flew across the sky, not knowing that so many people were waiting for him below. With his extremely high cultivation, even a master at the final stage of the Crossing Calamity stage would not be able to see him with the naked eye. His flying speed was so fast that it was almost silent. With a faint whooshing sound, the people squatting below immediately pricked up their ears. The people below almost couldn't see Wenlan Feng's figure when they looked up. However, they could tell that the sound was coming from the Baiwan kingdom. Judging from the shocking speed of the sound, they were basically sure that it was Wenlan Feng. In particular, there were several practitioners at the early stage of the soul formation realm on the way. They saw the almost indistinct shadow and recognized that it was Wenlan Feng from the figure. Compared with the others, they were even more shocked. They didn't expect that Wenlan Feng's cultivation had reached such a high level after 100 years of seclusion. No wonder he dared to challenge Bai Changchun. To everyone's surprise, Wenlan Feng came back safe and sound. Could it be that Bai Changchun had been defeated by him? This news was so important that everyone spread the news as fast as they could. For a moment, the soul formation realm in the cultivation world was boiling again. Bai Changchun was very likely defeated by Wenlan Feng. On the top of a snowy mountain in the Dirong Empire, Bing Qingzi, who was at the final stage of the soul formation realm, suddenly opened his eyes and stood up. He looked in the direction of the Baiwan kingdom in a daze, his white robe fluttering in the wind. In the cloud palace of the heavenly peak in the East Nation, Hu Changshou, who was at the final stage of the soul formation realm, flashed out of the palace and looked in the direction of the Baiwan kingdom through the sea of clouds in the Tuan kingdom, the headquarters of the World Chamber of Commerce, Cornucopia, god of Wealth Peak. Im Baikong was also looking in the direction of the Baiwan kingdom. He stroked the trunk of a pine tree and said in a muffled voice, when Lan Feng defeated Bai Changchun, "Unbelievable. Sikong, you've seen Bai Changchun's skills in the EC. Do you think this news is reliable?" Behind him stood a skinny man with white hair. He was his eldest disciple, the early stage of the soul formation realm, Sikong Ju. The gloomy Sikong Ju replied, "It's hard to say. I don't believe that there's always the number one in the world. Besides, when Lan Feng has really returned, there's no doubt about it." "You mean, when Lan Feng might really defeat Bai Changchun?" Yin Baikong turned around and asked. "Not necessarily." Sikong Ju frowned and said, "There's something that I can't figure out. It said that when Lan Feng went to the demon domain more than 10 days ago. Is his battle with Bai Changchun going to last more than 10 days? Yes. Yin Baikong looked in the direction of the Baiwan kingdom again and sighed. We'll understand everything after we go to the demon domain. However, the final news is not confirmed yet. If we suddenly go there, I'm afraid we'll get ourselves into trouble. Since when Lan Feng can return from the demon domain alive, it's worth it for us to make a great effort to befriend him no matter if he wins or loses. Sikong, prepare a gift for me. I'm going to Baiwan Kingdom to congratulate Wen Lan Feng for coming out of seclusion. By the way, I want a big gift." "Understood. I'll do it now." Sikong Ju bowed and left. The top 10 experts of the cultivation world were all late-stage soul formation experts. Unfortunately, 2 of them were killed by Bai Changchun in the Battle of the EC. In other words, there are only 8 late-stage soul formation experts left in the entire cultivation world. Among the 8, apart from Bai Changchun, Wen Lan Feng, Yin Baikong, Bing Qingzi, and Hu Changshou, the remaining 3 were also staring in the direction of the Baiwan Kingdom. They all felt that it was time to make a trip there. There were also lords of the mid-stage soul formation experts who came to the Baiwan Kingdom one after another. All of them brought gifts of great value. It should be known that if Wen Lan Feng really defeated Bai Changchun, he would be the true number 1 expert in the world. Even if he didn't defeat Bai Changchun, Wen Lan Feng's cultivation was worth befriending. Moreover, everyone wanted to inquire about the news. Chapter 5:27. The people who paid the most attention to Wen Lan Feng were naturally the people of the Wen family. Wen Rui had already sent people to wait outside the Fei ghost domain while he stayed in the Wen family to make arrangements. What arrangements? Naturally, it was to prepare for the Wen family's retreat after Wen Lan Feng was killed by Bai Changchun. It was related to the rise and fall of a big family, so early preparations had to be made. Baiwan country's holy land, the Holy Temple. Wen Rui stood quietly in the center of the hall, spending more than 10 days in anxiety and uneasiness. The disciples sent to wait outside the Fei ghost domain sent news that the old ancestor had safely returned from the Fei ghost domain and was heading to Baiwan country. When Rui raised his head and roared, shaking the furnishings in the hall and causing them to fall to the ground. The anxiety and uneasiness that had accumulated over the past few days poured out. This news was not told to anyone because the old ancestor did not like to be ostentatious. A figure flashed and appeared in the sky above the Holy Land alone, waiting for the old ancestor's return with an excited face. Wen Rui was even more excited when a figure rapidly approached from the distance. The old ancestor's cultivation had indeed improved greatly. Then, his vision blurred and a tall figure in a gray and white robe appeared in front of him. The gray and white robe fluttered in the wind. Wen Lan Feng smiled faintly and said, "Wen Rui, you've worked hard all these years." This sentence made Wen Rui's nose turn sour. He bowed deeply and said, "Welcome, old ancestor. Let's go back and talk." Wen Lan Feng had disappeared, but his voice still floated here. Wen Rui turned and returned. The holy temple of Baiwan country was hidden in the mountains and rivers. It was a palace made of white jade, white and warm, elegant and extraordinary. Wen Lan Feng walked in slowly. At this time, the holy temple was covered with things that had been tidied up. It was still clean and tidy. Because the jade was transparent and the dome was made of thin jade, The entire temple was filled with a hazy white light. That holy aura made everyone's heart feel holy and clear. Wen Lanfeng quietly walked to the central seat, slightly higher than the entire hall, and sat down. Under the holy white light, he looked at Wen Ruwei and smiled. "Were you waiting for me outside?" Although their cultivation was only 2 levels apart, Wen Ruwei was considered Wen Lanfeng's great-grandson. They were family. Wen Lanfeng had always been amiable, so Wen Ruwei was not nervous. He said frankly, "I heard that the old ancestor has returned from the Fey Ghost Domain. Of course, I have to welcome you. Let me ask you about someone. I don't know if you know him," Wen Lanfeng said. Wen Lanfeng said, Wen Ruwei had originally wanted to ask the old ancestor about the battle situation with Bai Changchun, but since the old ancestor had asked, he naturally had to reply first. "Yu Qianqiu," Wen Lanfeng asked, "have you heard of this person, Yu Qianqiu?" Wen Ruwei was stunned. Although he didn't understand why the great ancestor would mention Yu Qianqiu, he still told him everything he knew. "Not only do we know each other, but we even dated for a period of time. The cause of the matter was Mr. Nongzhu. This Yu Qianqiu pretended to be Mr. Nongzhu and got into a fight with the Wen family. He told how the Wen clan got acquainted with Yu Qianqiu and how Yu Qianqiu fought with the cultivators of the various nations during the Deyang Kingdom's Prince Consort Selection martial arts competition, and how Yu Qianqiu's subordinates profaned the princess of Deyang Kingdom. In order to protect his subordinates, he killed Hua Zhongming's disciple and then escaped from Deyang City. These were all the information that Wen Bai sent back. Impersonating Nongzhu? Wen Lanfeng was stunned for a moment, but then he felt relieved. The two of them knew each other, but after hearing Wen Ruwei's words, Yu Qianqiu was indeed as wicked as Nongzhu said. Could it be that he had to protect such a guy? He smiled bitterly and shook his head. "I heard that Yu Qianqiu has caused some trouble recently." "Yes." Wen Ruwei nodded and told him about Yu Qianqiu's massacre in the fog forest. After he finished, he sighed. "This guy is an endless stream of strange skills. I didn't expect him to be able to come and go freely in the fog forest. I heard from Nongzhu that he has a powerful background, but I don't know the specifics. His background is indeed powerful." Nongzhu's words are correct. Wen Lanfeng sighed. "What's his background? Elder Ancestor, can you tell me?" Wen Ruwei asked curiously. "Don't tell anyone else." Wen Lanfeng sighed. "Yu Qianqiu is Bai Changchun's disciple." "What?" Wen Ruwei was surprised. "I had guessed it before, but I didn't expect him to be Bai Changchun's disciple." After thinking about it, he asked nervously, "Did the ancestor go to the demon domain to find Bai Changchun?" Wen Lanfeng understood something from his twinkling eyes. He shook his head and sighed. I lost again to Bai Changchun, and it was even worse than 100 years ago. My life was hanging by a thread, and Nongzhu saved me again. Ha! Bai Changchun is an existence that I can never surpass." His tone was full of bitterness. Wen Ruwei was silent. Nongzhu had already told him that the ancestor was no match for Bai Changchun. He was someone who knew, so he was not surprised. At least the ancestor came back alive, which was a blessing in disguise. After a pause, he said, "Ancestor, there are many people in the cultivation world who are concerned about this matter." "Humph, a bunch of arrogant guys. Everyone knows what they are planning." "If I had known, I would have let Bai Changchun do it himself." Wen Lanfeng sneered. "But it's fine. It saved me a lot of trouble. I just need to wait for the guests." Wen Ruwei nodded and then added softly, "Ancestor, not long after you left, Senior Liu of Spirit Fong Valley came to find you." Upon hearing this, Wen Lanfeng jumped to his feet and muttered to himself with an excited expression, "She came to see me personally? She came to find me personally." After a few words of excitement, his expression became gloomy again. He shook his head and said, "I'm afraid that she came to find me for no other reason. She must have heard the news and came to stop me from going to the demon domain to find Bai Changchun." "Huh, I haven't fulfilled my promise to defeat Bai Changchun. How can I face you? I'm afraid I won't have the chance in this life. Why should I see you again?" Wen Ruwei lowered his head helplessly. "Ancestor, just wake up." However, this was the ancestor's private matter. It was not his place to interrupt. Yu Qianqiu, who was in the mist forest, knew nothing about what was happening outside. After knowing that he had become an expert in the early stage of tribulation passing, he looked around happily. He stood on the golden altar and giggled unscrupulously. After all, he was the only one here. Before leaving, Yu Qianqiu suddenly raised his arms and shouted, "Thank you, dense fog forest, thank you, 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 thank you." What do you mean? Is someone from the immortal world coming again? Yu Qianqiu put down his hands and looked around in shock at the colorful fog on the mountain peak. He guessed that another immortal was going to suffer. He took a few steps back and stood at the edge of the altar, leaving the center of the altar for the immortal world to descend to the mortal world. Yu Qianqiu crossed his arms and looked on coldly. He snorted and said, "Life is short. Like the morning dew, there are not many people who can see the immortal world die." He looked very proud, thinking about what treasure the next immortal world would have. Outside, the mist forest, the cultivators from the various countries had already dispersed. However, there were still some people hiding in the surrounding clouds. They were the people from the various countries who stayed behind to continue observing. They wanted to prevent Yu Qianqiu from running away. Even if they didn't catch him, they would at least follow him when they discovered him. However, these people suddenly realized that in the sky above the central area of the mist forest, there were dark clouds rolling, lightning flashing, and thunder rumbling. The dark clouds kept rolling, accumulating into a thick layer of clouds. Lightning dragons flickered in and out of the clouds, spitting out ferocious lightning bolts. Suddenly, an early-stage tribulation-passing cultivator shouted, "It's the tribulation clouds." Someone beside him frowned and said, "Something is going through the tribulation clouds in the mist forest. I don't know if it's a human, a demon, or a ghost." The people hiding in the clouds came out one after another. One should know that the power contained in the tribulation clouds was huge. It was even more powerful than the people who were going through the tribulation clouds below. Once the surrounding clouds and mist were implicated, the people hiding inside wouldn't have a good time. Actually, there was something that Yu Qianqiu, who was hiding inside, and the cultivators hiding outside, did not know. Previously, when the Immortal Ascension passage opened, although the sky was also covered by dark clouds, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled, the people outside the mist forest did not see or hear anything. On the contrary, the appearance of the tribulation clouds this time allowed everyone to see it. Yu Qianqiu, who was standing on the golden altar with his arms crossed, gradually felt that something was wrong. The wind and clouds were turbulent, lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled. However, it did not condense into a black hole like last time. Instead, it seemed like a conspiracy was brewing in the sky. The strong wind swept through the basin. Yu Qianqiu was like a small boat in the raging waves. He wanted to leave, but in order to see what was happening behind him, he was forced to stay by the side and hugged a golden pillar to resist the strong wind. "Damn it, I'll endure it for the sake of watching a good show. I hope you won't disappoint me." Yu Qianqiu hugged the pillar and shouted towards the sky. He thought that the commotion this time was even bigger than the previous time when the immortals descended to the mortal world. He reckoned that there would be a good show to watch, and perhaps the benefits would be greater. In the end, the heavens immediately gave him an answer. Boom! A loud sound shook the sky, and the basin was filled with echoes. A ferocious and meandering thick thunderbolt instantly smashed down with a bang, illuminating the entire basin clearly. The sound and the aura were shocking. Yu Qianqiu felt that it was blinding, and he squinted his eyes. However, before he could react, he felt as if he was struck by lightning, and his whole body went numb. He, who was hugging the golden pillar, was sent flying and rolled to the center of the golden altar. His whole body was charred, and his clothes were ragged. The charred smoke from his body was blown away by the wind. He laid there, and his eyes rolled back, and he instantly fainted. The so-called tribulation clouds were the 9 stages of tribulation clouds in the sky. Each stage was stronger than the previous one. If one could withstand it, he would succeed. If not, there was no need to explain the consequences. In fact, the early stage of tribulation clouds was not very difficult for most cultivators to withstand. However, Yu Qianqiu did not even think about tribulation clouds and was still waiting to watch the show. In the end, he was unprepared for the lightning's wrath, and it would be strange if he was not unlucky. This was retribution. The lightning flashed more frequently in the dark clouds, and the next wave of more powerful lightning strikes was coming. However, Yu Qianqiu really fainted. At this moment, a golden light suddenly appeared from his abdomen, and it was even more dazzling than the entire golden altar. It slowly wrapped around Yu Qianqiu. Chapter 528. The dark clouds in the sky darkened, and the wind surged. The lightning dragon stuck out its tongue and peeped at the golden light below. The situation seemed to be a confrontation. Suddenly, there was a thunderclap, and a lightning bolt as thick as a bucket drilled out of the dark clouds and went straight for the golden light in the center of the altar. The golden light that was wrapped around Yu Qianqiu also shone with thousands of golden rays in an instant, enveloping the entire platform of the altar. A green and white light and a golden light instantly collided with each other. Boom! The two forces collided, creating a loud sound in the air, and a powerful shock wave spread to the entire basin. The green and white lightning bolt was obviously weaker, and it was instantly destroyed by the brilliant golden light. Even the cultivators outside the fog forest heard the loud sound, and they looked at each other in shock, not knowing what was going on. At first, the first lightning bolt looked quite normal, like someone in the early stage of the tribulation passing. How did the second lightning bolt become so powerful in an instant? It was like a cultivator in the middle stage of the tribulation passing. Look, someone cried out in surprise. In the sky above the center of the fog forest, the dark clouds gradually turned as black as ink, surging and surging. It was extremely terrifying, and countless lightning dragons were shuttling in the dark clouds. The scene was even worse than the tribulation passing at the end of the tribulation passing. Just as the thunder in the sky was brewing its power, the golden light in the basin seemed to be angry. The golden light shot up from the basin into the sky like countless giant golden thorns, shining and stirring the dark clouds. In the ink-like dark clouds, the lightning bolts became more intense, and they crazily revolved around the golden thorns. The monstrous wind and waves rushed in all directions, forcing people thousands of meters away to quickly retreat. Everyone looked at the scene in the distance, bewildered in the dark clouds. A golden light pierced through the sky and rushed into the universe. The golden light shone in the universe, and then it immediately retracted, as if it was summoning something. In the vast universe, because of the appearance of this golden light, the nearby 12 stars instantly shone with silver splendor, and they quickly shot toward the coordinates exposed by the golden light. 12 rays of silver light broke through the atmosphere and shot toward the dark clouds that were entangled with the golden light. Every time the silver splendor rushed into the dark clouds, there would be an earth-shattering explosion in the sky. 12 consecutive earth-shattering explosions were deafening to the ears of those hiding 10,000 meters away. The dark clouds that filled the sky were instantly dispersed by the 12 silver splendors. The sporadic lightning also disappeared without a trace with 2 crackling sounds. The moment the dark clouds dispersed, the people in the distance could see the sky clearly. Tens of thousands of golden rays converged into a single line and returned to the fog forest. The 12 silver rays that came from the sky followed the direction where the golden rays had returned on the altar in the basin. The golden light retracted back into Yu Qianqiu's abdomen. The concentrated silver light descended from the sky and covered his body. The silver light flashed for a while. After a while, the silver light shrunk back into the sky and split into 12 silver pillars again. At this point, everything returned to its original state. Oh my God! On the golden altar, Yu Qianqiu woke up with a groan. He got up and looked around, but he didn't find anything unusual. Was it a dream? Wasn't it a little too real? Yu Qianqiu turned around twice suspiciously. Suddenly, he realized that something was wrong with his body. He looked at himself and was instantly shocked. His entire body seemed to be swollen and was wrapped in a charred mass. Both his hands were like bare paws. He quickly peeled himself off, and the charred shell on his body started to crack and fall off piece by piece. Damn it. So, I was really struck by lightning just now. Yu Qianqiu kept cursing. After peeling off the charred shell on his body, he immediately circulated the water art, and a water dragon wrapped around him to wash him. After cleaning up, he quickly took a set of clothes from Utopia and put them on. He searched the ground and realized that his storage bag had become a tattered cloth bag. Fortunately, it was just a decoration and didn't contain anything. On the other hand, the bracelet on his wrist was still intact. The quality of the items of the deities was indeed better. He finally understood that he was undergoing tribulation transcendence just now. As his cultivation had already broken through to the early stage of tribulation transcendence, he was still waiting for the lightning to strike him. It was good that he didn't die, so he didn't dare to complain. However, what made him feel strange was that tribulation transcendence should have 9 lightning tribulations. Could it be that he had fainted on the ground and endured the other 8 lightning strikes? Even the people watching from afar couldn't figure it out, let alone those who were asleep. It clearly looked like a tribulation transcendence, but the state of the lightning strikes was somewhat abnormal. The strangest thing was that after 2 lightning strikes, the tribulation clouds were dispersed by the golden light on the ground and the silver light that descended from the sky. Such a phenomenon was unheard of and unseen. Such a phenomenon naturally had to be reported, so the cultivators all reported what had happened. Yu Qianqiu searched the basin carefully again. When he realized that there was nothing that interested him, he flew out of the basin without another word. After finding the direction he had come from, he released the blue fire flying sword to scout ahead and quietly returned to the place where he had been entangled with the various sections. After checking, he realized that there was no one outside. He immediately felt that it was strange. Could there be an ambush outside? Thinking about it, he felt that it was possible. He retreated into the depths of the fog and disappeared. Once he returned to Utopia, he immediately found Guan Yu and asked him to come up with another battle plan. Guan Yu said in shock, "Who are you targeting this time? Damn it, over 5,000 people are chasing after me. This is intolerable, especially those bastards from the Jinshan Kingdom." Yu Qianqiu said fiercely, "The target is very clear. The coordinates of the Jinshan Kingdom's Spirit Stone Mine are all in place. I'll go scout tonight. Get ready, just like what happened to the Dying Kingdom last time." Hearing that Yu Qianqiu was being chased by over 5,000 people, Guan Yu's face sank. He nodded and said, "Don't worry. The team can assemble at any time to fight. However, don't you have to consider something? We just massacred the Dying Kingdom's Spirit Stone Mine. Will the Jinshan Kingdom be prepared?" Yu Qianqiu immediately replied, "That's why I'm going to scout. If it really causes a large number of casualties, I naturally won't act rashly. It's not worth it. However, I think their attention is not on the Spirit Stone Mine now. I'm afraid it's a good opportunity for us to strike." Understood. Guan Yu nodded decisively. He didn't know that Yu Qianqiu had attracted a lot of attention by killing more than 2,000 people outside. Since Yu Qianqiu said it was okay, what else could he say? Dian City, Dirong Kingdom's embassy. State Preceptor Man who led 3 junior brothers to accompany Yan Zhuixing, while 3rd brother and 4th brother stayed on Everlasting Island. At this time, Yan Zhuixing was asking a Dirong Kingdom cultivator about Yu Qianqiu in detail. Because they didn't know that Yu Qianqiu had massacred 2,000 cultivators on the way, they were shocked when they learned about it. They didn't expect Yu Qianqiu to be so powerful. Yan Zhuixing's eyes flashed with brilliance, and he kept smiling. After learning that when Lan Feng had come out of seclusion and had returned to Bai Wan Kingdom for Monster Domain, Man Who waved his hand to dismiss the cultivator and asked, "Young Palace Master, what's your next step? From what you said, it seems that when Lan Feng might have defeated the world's #1 expert. It's really admirable." Yan Zhuixing turned back and said, "I want to see the world's #2 expert. I wonder if State Preceptor has a way to take me there? This man who pondered for a while and shook his head. It's difficult to break into Baiwan Kingdom's sacred land. I'm afraid it won't be easy to meet Wenlan Feng. There's always a way. Yan Zhuixing pursed his lips and smiled faintly. I have a hunch that since Baiwan Kingdom is so lively, we might meet Yu Qianshou there. Hearing that they could meet Yu Qianshou, their faces darkened. He was the enemy who killed their second brother. Man who said in a deep voice, "Since young palace master wants to go, we'll accompany you. Wenlan Feng coming out of seclusion is a big deal. Maybe we can meet master." That's great. I'm about to thank him for taking care of me. Yan Zhuixing sighed. After a short discussion, they decided on the itinerary to Baiwan Kingdom. The unusual phenomenon in the fog forest set off an uproar in the cultivation world. Such a divine event had never been heard of before. It was really unbelievable. However, what made people depressed was that this matter just had to happen in the misty forest, making people unable to investigate even if they wanted to. Then, the next day, another shocking event happened in the cultivation world. 13 spirit stone mines in the Jinshan Kingdom were all massacred overnight. Everything that could be looted was robbed, and everyone who could be killed was killed. The situation was the same as in the Dayan Kingdom. All the spirit stone mines were blown up. The most arrogant thing was that the murderer did not hide anything at all. The 13 hero flags were all in the 13 spirit stone mines. It was obvious that the murderer did not care about the Jinshan Kingdom's lord, Pu Taidong. In the Jinshan Kingdom's throne room, Pu Taidong was so angry that he almost vomited blood. He looked up to the sky and roared. He couldn't figure out, and he couldn't understand it. He didn't know what kind of bad luck he had run into. First, 5 disciples in the late tribulation passing stage had been killed, and now all the spirit stone mines had suffered such a fate. The losses were too heavy, and his vitality was greatly damaged. This wasn't something that could be recovered in a year or two. Overnight, the entire cultivation world suddenly realized that during this period of time, either nothing happened or something big happened, attracting everyone's attention. Everyone started counting with their fingers. First, Yin Baikong's grandson was kidnapped by a hero in the Dayan Kingdom. Yin Baikong did not have any temper and paid more than 300 million spirit stones. Second, Yu Qianshou was discovered after he snuck in. He claimed to be the #1 expert below the soul formation stage, which attracted the attention of the cultivators of the various countries. In the end, the cultivators of the various countries suffered a loss. Third, Huazhoming's 17 spirit stone mines were massacred by a hero overnight, which shocked the entire cultivation world. Fourth, Yu Qianshou was chased by the cultivators of the various countries. After he escaped to the fog forest, he turned around and slaughtered nearly 2,000 cultivators of the various countries. This shocked the entire cultivation world again. Chapter 529. Fifth, when Lan Feng came out of seclusion, went to Demon Domain to challenge by Changchun, and then returned safely. Sixth, the divine might of heaven and earth incident in dense fog forest, which caused the entire cultivation world to boil. Seventh, the spirit stone mine in Pu Taidong's hands was massacred by the hero, which was exactly the same as Huazhoming's experience, forcing all the countries to send more manpower to defend their spirit stone mines. Previously, everyone guessed that the hero was someone who deliberately caused trouble for Yin Baikong, and then they guessed that it was an organization that deliberately caused trouble in Dayan Kingdom. Now, everyone realized that something was wrong. The hero seemed to have started in Dayan Kingdom, and the nearby Jinshan Kingdom suffered a calamity soon after. Who would be next? No one could be sure of the answer to this question, so they could only strengthen the defense of their own spirit stone mines. In just a short period of 2 months, the seemingly calm cultivation world had actually experienced so many major events. It was simply too much for everyone's eyes to take in. Many people liked to watch the bustle, and they would go wherever there was trouble. They realized that in their entire lives of cultivation, this was the first time they were running around so frequently. Everyone counted the 7 major events and found that as long as the hero appeared, he would do something that shocked the cultivation world. Out of the 7 major events, he took up 3. Then, out of the 7 major events, Yu Qianshou also took up 2. The other 2 were separate events. Yu Qianshou didn't think about this at all. To him, he didn't have anything better to do than to count his fingers and think about this. However, what others did not know was that the events caused by the hero were actually done by him, Yu Qianshou. The other divine might of heaven incident in dense fog forest was also related to him, but even he did not know about it. In this way, out of the 7 major events, Yu Qianshou had caused 6. If Wu Sihai of China's cultivation world knew about this, he would not be surprised, because he had long since concluded that wherever this guy went, there would be endless trouble. He was a jinx. Now, even the soul formation experts of the various countries were looking left and right, not knowing which side to focus on. After living for so many years, they had never seen such a frequent occurrence. Everyone was preparing to meet Wen Lanfeng. The commotion caused by the heavenly might of the dense fog forest made everyone want to go and take a look. However, before they could even reach the dense fog forest, Pu Taidong Spirit Stone Mine was once again massacred by heroes. Thus, they immediately returned to arrange for people to defend the Spirit Stone Mine in case of an ambush. Someone joked that the 8th major event was about to arrive. When others asked him what it was, he laughed and said, "The cornucopia that happens once every 10 years. Just when everyone agreed on this statement, someone started spreading a rumor in the cultivation world that the heavens might incident in the dense fog forest was due to the birth of a precious treasure. The object that was emitting thousands of rays of golden light was actually the 10,000 flying swords of the Myriad Swords Demon Monarch during the Ancient War. After the news spread, the whole cultivation world was in an uproar again. Who was the Myriad Swords Demon Monarch? That was the #1 expert of the ancient times. It was said that countless immortals had fallen at his hands. 10,000 flying swords that could kill immortals. Oh my! Not to mention 10,000. Anyone who could get one would be incredible. It was much more powerful than the rare superior grade spirit treasure. Although it was just a rumor and shouldn't be easily believed, there was no smoke without fire. Everyone thought about it and agreed. The 10,000 rays of golden light could attract lightning, and in the end, 12 rays of silver light descended from the sky to suppress its power. If this wasn't a treasure, what was it? If it was a treasure that could cause such a huge commotion, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was the 10,000 flying swords of the Myriad Swords Demon Monarch. But everyone wasn't a fool, so they naturally had to confirm the source of the news. The whole cultivation world mobilized and traced back to the source. Very soon, they found that the source of the news was from the Golden Mountain Country. Thus, the Golden Mountain Country caught the person who spread the rumor. He was a loose cultivator from the Golden Mountain Country. In order to get the most reliable facts, the dignified mid-stage soul formation Pu Taidong personally interrogated him. Even Hua Zongming and other soul formation experts rushed over. In the end, that young cultivator almost peed his pants. How many people could withstand the pressure of a soul formation expert? Not to mention that there were so many of them at once. That young cultivator said, "I never thought I would see so many soul formation experts in my life. I'll accept it even if I die." Thus, he answered whatever everyone asked. In the end, that young cultivator wasn't the true source of the news. The reason was that a few nights ago, he was roasting something in the wilderness. Suddenly, someone flew over and roasted something with him. That person's roasting skills were quite good, and he even took out a lot of good wine to drink with. When the two of them chatted, they naturally talked about the Shenwei incident that caused a lot of commotion recently. That person laughed and said, "What bullsh asterisk T Shenwei incident? I just came out of the dense fog forest and saw everything clearly." The young cultivator immediately mocked. "You really know how to brag. Do you think you're Yu Qianshou and can come and go as you please in the fog forest? F asterisk CK. That person laughed. "Damn it. I'm Yu Qianshou in the first place. Do I need to pretend to be myself? Stop bragging. If you're Yu Qianshou, then tell me, what exactly happened in the fog forest?" The young cultivator was only saying this casually. Unexpectedly, that person took it seriously. He patted his chest and said loudly, "I never lie or brag. I travel the world with my reputation. Let me tell you, what happened in the fog forest wasn't some Shinwei incident. It was a peerless treasure that was about to appear. I saw it with my own eyes." The young cultivator didn't take it seriously at all. Anyway, it was a long night and he was bored. Thus, he joked, "Then tell me what peerless treasure was about to appear." That person looked at him for a while, then shrugged. "Forget it. It doesn't matter if I tell you. You're just a small rogue cultivator. Even if you tell others, no one will believe you." He shook his head and exclaimed, "So this fog forest is the burial place of the ancient number 1 expert, Demon Lord of Thousand Swords. I didn't know at first. Coincidentally, I had just broken through to the early stage of tribulation passing and was about to undergo my tribulation. I accidentally attracted the lightning. A bolt of lightning struck down and split open a large ancient tomb. When the second bolt of lightning struck down, the ancient tomb suddenly shot out thousands of golden rays, blocking the heavenly lightning. When the lightning struck again, thousands of golden rays shot up to the sky and dispersed the tribulation clouds. I was so happy. I didn't think I would pass through the tribulation so easily." "Really?" the young cultivator asked. "Then how did you determine that the thousands of golden rays were Demon Lord of Thousand Swords, flying swords?" That person said with a "don't believe me" expression, "I was curious at the time. I didn't know what helped me pass the tribulation. Thus, I went into that ancient tomb. Guess what I saw?" Although the young cultivator didn't believe him, he couldn't help but ask because of how interesting his story was. "What did you see?" That person gestured with his hands and said, "It was a huge underground space. The ground was covered with golden bricks. In the middle, there was an altar made of pure gold that was dozens of meters high. Below the altar, there were long swords that were shining with golden rays. On the altar, there was a dried corpse. If it wasn't for the inscription on the golden pillar, who could guess that the dried corpse was Demon Lord of Thousand Swords?" What did the inscription say? The young cultivator had already forgotten whether he was telling the truth or not. He only wanted to know the ending of the story. It didn't say anything. That person tore a piece of roasted meat and chewed it. Then he drank some wine and said vaguely, "Demon Lord of Thousand Swords, Transcendence, Golden Body. That's all." Demon Lord of Thousand Swords, flying swords were stuck under the altar. "Did you take a few?" "No." That person shook his head. "Huh, you gave yourself away. If it really was Demon Lord of Thousand Swords, flying swords, how could you not take them out?" The young cultivator laughed. But that person sneered. "You think I didn't want to? The key is that the pressure from the swords is too strong. With my cultivation, I can't even get close. If my cultivation reaches the end of the tribulation, I might be able to take 1 or 2. The young cultivator smiled and didn't bother to argue with him. Moreover, he couldn't see through the other party's cultivation. If he angered the other party and attacked him, it would be over. Later, that person finished a pot of wine, patted his buttocks, and left. The next day, when a young cultivator was chatting with someone, the other party mentioned Shinwei. In order to show off his knowledge, he said that Demon Lord of Thousand Swords, flying swords were about to appear. In the end, one person spread to 10, and 10 to 100. In just a few days, everyone in the cultivation world knew about it. After listening to the young cultivator's honest confession, Pu Tai Dong and the others looked at each other and walked out of the interrogation room. Now, their biggest doubt was whether the person who talked to the young cultivator that night was Yu Qianshou. According to the tone of the young cultivator, the tone really does sound like Yu Qianshou, who likes to call himself lousy. Zoming narrowed his eyes and said, "If we can prove that Yu Qianshou's cultivation has really advanced from the nascent soul stage to the tribulation stage, then that person might really be Yu Qianshou. Even if it's Yu Qianshou, so what?" When Pu Taidong mentioned Yu Qianshou, he gritted his teeth and said hatefully, "Do you think that kid is telling the truth? If there really is such a place, why would he casually tell others when he saw it?" At this moment, the eldest disciple by Meng quickly ran over to report, "Master, there's news from the foot of the mountain. Yu Qianshou's sneak attacked the disciples we sent to the mining site. Out of the dozen people that little junior brother led, he is the only one left alive. The dozen or so soul formation stage experts looked at each other and shook their heads slightly. It seemed that Yu Qianshou planned to take revenge. Pu Taidong's face turned red, and he shouted, "A bunch of useless trash. A dozen or so people can't beat a nascent soul stage cultivator. My old face has been completely lost by you all." Bai Meng didn't dare to say anything. After all, he was the one who lost the most face last time. He just lowered his head and said softly, "I heard little junior brother say that Yu Qianshou's cultivation has increased greatly. It seems that he has already broken through to the tribulation stage. He doesn't even need to use a flying sword to fly. Even if Yu Qianshou's cultivation has reached the early tribulation stage, so what? Have you ever seen a late tribulation stage cultivator lose to an early tribulation stage cultivator?" Pu Taidong was still shouting, but Hua Zongming stepped in between the two of them and waved his hand to interrupt. "Bai Meng, you leave first." Chapter 530. Bai Meng glanced at his master's expression and slowly retreated. Yu Qianshou has already broken through to the early stage of tribulation passing. Interesting. Hua Zongming patted Pu Taidong's shoulder and looked back at the crowd. "What do you think?" Pu Taidong came back to his senses and said in a daze, "In that case, the person talking to this little cultivator might really be Yu Qianshou." His gaze swept across the crowd. "Even if it's Yu Qianshou, you don't really think they're the treasure left behind by the demon lord of thousand swords in the misty forest, do you?" Everyone was silent. There was still some doubt in this matter. They were all thinking about something. "Have you heard of a place?" The one who spoke was Zhang Yuan State's Miao Han Yuan. Everyone looked at him, waiting for him to continue. Miao Han Yuan lightly said, "Immortal Ascension Stage." "What?" Someone couldn't help but exclaim. Most of the people present were at a loss. They were unfamiliar with this term, but there were a few who were moved. Pu Taidong looked around and frowned. "Miao Han Yuan, what are you trying to say? Don't talk in riddles." Miao Han Yuan glanced at the expressionless Hua Zongming. "I'm sure Brother Hua has heard of this place." Hua Zongming smiled disapprovingly and didn't say anything. Sikong Ju, who was standing in the crowd, slowly walked out with his hands in his sleeves. "I've heard of this place from my master. Legend has it that in ancient times, when cultivators reached a certain level, they would ascend to the immortal world through a place called the Immortal Ascension Stage. However, this is only a legend. No one knows where it is. Is the Immortal Ascension Stage that Lord Miao is talking about the one I'm talking about?" He, as expected of Yin Baikong's brilliant disciple. "You're really knowledgeable." Miao Han Yuan sneered. "I happen to read a record in an ancient book. It says that a certain place is paved with countless gold bricks. In the middle, there's a platform built with gold. This platform is called the Immortal Ascension Stage. Cultivators whose cultivation surpasses the soul formation stage can ascend to the immortal world." "Brother Hua, am I right?" Hua Zongming chuckled. He knew he couldn't hide it any longer, so he said, "I also thought it was strange. If the person talking to that little cultivator was really Yu Qianshou, then why is the ancient tomb that Yu Qianshou mentioned so similar to the legendary Immortal Ascension Stage? The floor is also paved with golden bricks, and there's also a golden platform in the middle. Could it be a coincidence? The Immortal Ascension Stage is hidden in the fog forest?" Pu Taidong asked in surprise. Miao Han Yuan narrowed his eyes and said, "In my opinion, if this Immortal Ascension Stage really exists, I'm afraid it's either in the East Holy Land or in the dense fog forest." Everyone nodded in agreement. In this world, only these two places hid secrets that were not known to outsiders. For a moment, everyone fell silent, each with their own ulterior motives. Although there was no confirmation, everyone was certain that the person was Yu Qianshou. Moreover, the theory that the myriad swords demon lord's golden body was hidden in the Immortal Ascension Stage was very believable. However, even if that was the case, who had the ability to enter the dense fog forest? The only thing they could do now was to capture Yu Qianzhou and force him to reveal the secret of how he could enter and exit the dense fog forest at will. The group of people with ulterior motives took their leave. When there were only 5 people who were on good terms with Pu Taidong left, Zhongming frowned and said, "Miao Han Yuan, what the hell are you doing?" What he was implying was, "Why are you forcing me to tell everyone the truth?" After Pu Taidong and the others understood the truth, they also gave Miao Han Yuan a questioning look. This didn't make sense. The myriad swords demon lords, 10,000 flying sword were enough for the 6 of us to share. Why did you have to make it known to the entire cultivation world? Wasn't this just looking for trouble? Miao Han Yuan glanced at them and sneered. We weren't the only ones who heard that little cultivator's words. Do you think you can keep this secret to yourself? Humph. It won't be long before the entire cultivation world knows. The myriad swords demon lord's treasures are a huge temptation. Whoever stands at the heart of the struggle will be unlucky. The 5 of us can't withstand such a huge lightning bolt. So, let those who are capable go. The more chaotic, the better. We'd better stick together and watch from the side. There's no hurry. When the others heard this, they understood and nodded their heads in understanding. Miao Han Yuan looked at Hua Zhongming and Pu Taidong and said, "It's better for you two to bear your grudges for now. Preserving your strength is the best strategy. When the time comes, it will definitely be of great use." The 2 of them nodded in agreement. Then, the 6 of them began to make plans. Yu Qianzhou had witnessed the fall of the myriad swords demon lord's golden body in the dense fog forest, as well as the legendary immortal ascension stage. This matter quickly spread throughout the cultivation world. Even the story of that little cultivator was made public by people with intentions. This matter spread like wildfire, and the cultivators of the various countries were in an uproar. Everyone understood that not just anyone could enter the dense fog forest, but Yu Qianzhou could come and go as he pleased. Now, whoever could find Yu Qianzhou and unravel the secret of entering and leaving the dense fog forest could possibly obtain the treasures left behind by the myriad swords demon lord. The World Commerce Association even offered a reward of 100 million high-grade spirit stones. Whoever could provide information on Yu Qianzhou and lead the World Commerce Association to find Yu Qianzhou will be able to obtain the 100 million high-grade spirit stones. Of course, whether or not they could catch him was the World Commerce Association's business. As long as the information provided was useful, they could obtain the reward. This time it was lively. The World Commerce Association had used their powerful financial resources to set up informants in the entire cultivation world. Those cultivators with low cultivation could only dream about the treasures of the myriad swords demon lord. No one thought they could obtain them. However, the reward of 100 million high-grade spirit stones was something that anyone could hope to obtain. For a moment, the various countries were filled with low-level cultivators scurrying around with dreams of getting rich. The Cornucopia Gathering, which was originally ranked 8th in the cultivation world, was moved back to 9th place. Now, the 8th major event was that the various countries were looking for Yu Qianzhou in order to obtain the treasures left behind by the myriad swords demon lord. The Jinshan country could be said to be in the eye of this matter, because the last time Yu Qianzhou appeared, he was in the Jinshan country. Moreover, the dense fog forest was also within the borders of the Jinshan country. Who dared to say that Yu Qianzhou himself did not want to obtain the treasures left behind by the myriad swords demon lord? It was said that it was only because his cultivation was not high enough that he could not obtain it. Presumably, he was still thinking of a way. Therefore, the chances of finding Yu Qianzhou within the borders of the Jinshan country was the highest. Those cultivators with low cultivation often traveled in groups of 3 to 5. It was precisely because of their low cultivation that they formed groups for safety. At this time, Yu Qianzhou also joined a team of 3 people looking for Yu Qianzhou as a rogue cultivator. In order to dream of getting rich, the 3 people wandered everywhere within the borders of the Jinshan country. Among the 3 people, 2 of them were only at the middle stage of foundation establishment, so Yu Qianzhou claimed to be at the early stage of core formation and showed a little of his skill, subduing the other two and becoming the leader of the group of three. The capital of the Jinshan country, Gold Casting City, in the wilderness dozens of miles north of the city, there was a large connected villa. This villa was originally built by a wealthy businessman for leisure purposes. Later, because it was ransacked by bandits, the entire villa's several hundred people were all killed, and it became an inauspicious place. Coupled with the frequent haunting, this place became the famous Ghost Manor. In fact, the so-called haunting was just a prank made by some rogue cultivators who had nowhere to stay. But over time, the reputation of the Ghost Manor spread, and mortals would definitely keep a respectful distance. Therefore, this place was occupied by rogue cultivators from all over the country. Of course, there was no lack of cultivators with backgrounds from various countries temporarily resting. Chapter 531. Yu Qianshou's group of three also came to the Ghost Manor because of its fame. The so-called fame was just an excuse that Yu Qianshou used to fool the other two. In reality, it was because he knew that this place was a good place to gather information. The other two didn't have any objections. During this period of time, they followed Yu Qianshou and ate well and had a lot of fun. Moreover, whenever they encountered a little trouble, the boss could always easily solve it. The two felt that it was good to continue living like this. No one expected to meet Yu Qianshou and become rich. In short, their lives were much better than before. They no longer had to be timid because of their low cultivation. Boss would take care of everything, and they only needed to be obedient and run errands. The Ghost Manor was surrounded by mountains and rivers. Under the lush green mountains, there was a small bridge beside the flowing water. It occupied an area of more than 100 mu and had a grand layout. This kind of livable place was rare in the entire Golden Mountain country. It could be seen that the owner who built it was indeed rich. However, from the peeling paint on the walls and the old marks that were covered with moss, one could see that it lacked maintenance. The three of them landed in the center of the Ghost Manor on their flying swords. They looked around and saw groups of loose cultivators bragging. Seeing that someone had come, those loose cultivators only glanced at them and continued to brag. No one paid attention to them. It was Yu Qianshou's first time here. He thought that this place was in disrepair and should be dilapidated. He didn't expect that the inside would be so tidy. The seedlings and flower beds that were scattered around were lush and green. Not even a single weed could be seen. It was obvious that someone had been taking care of it. Boss, let's go see if there are any empty rooms. The one who spoke was called Qin Jiaxing. The other one was called Fu Chan. Yu Qianshou looked around and waved his hand, indicating that they should go ahead and look around. It was clearly not their first time here. They greeted each other and went out of the east and west gates of the garden. They were very familiar with the way. Yu Qianshou was no longer called Yu Qianshou, but Niu Yud. His face was no longer his original face. He had put on another human skin mask. Back when he was in Shi Wenguang's military camp, he had prepared a few masks in advance, as if he had a premonition that they would come in handy. A one-armed old man in the garden caught Yu Qianshou's attention. His hair and beard were white, and he wore a gray robe with an empty left sleeve pinned to his belt. The old man looked old, but his back was straight. He was controlling a flying sword with one hand to prune the weeds and plants in the garden. He looked like a servant in the manor, but since he could control a flying sword, he was clearly not a servant. Yu Qianshou was startled. He looked at the nursery beds around him. It seemed like it was all thanks to this old man that everything looked so neat and tidy. He actually couldn't see through his cultivation. Yu Qianshou muttered to himself. He was now in the early stage of the crossing calamity stage. Among the rogue cultivators he had met recently, there were few who had a higher cultivation than him. He didn't expect that an inconspicuous disabled rogue cultivator would have a higher cultivation than him. What surprised him the most was that this old man's cultivation was at least in the middle stage of the crossing calamity stage, but he was doing this rough work here. Yu Qianshou pinched his chin and frowned. He walked up to the old man and cupped his hands, saying, "May I ask if you are the owner of this place?" "Ha!" As soon as Yu Qianshou finished speaking, he heard a lot of laughter around him. He looked around and saw groups of rogue cultivators staring at him and laughing. It was obvious that they were laughing at him. Yu Qianqiu looked at himself and touched his face. He didn't find anything wrong, so he didn't know why they were laughing at him. So he cupped his hands and said, "I'm Niu Yud. I'm new here. Why are you laughing at me? But what did I say or do wrong?" When he said this, he looked at the old man behind him with an inquiring look. However, the old man seemed to be oblivious to his own business and only cared about cutting his own branches. "You don't need to say anything. We also know that you are new here," someone said coldly. Then a group of people laughed again. Yu Qianqiu turned his head and saw several people sitting unsteadily on the railings of a corridor separated by a red-crowned branch eaves. One of them was leaning against a pillar and playing with a bamboo flute in his hand. He glanced at him disdainfully, giving off a cool feeling. Yo, he looks so young, but his cultivation has already reached the early stage of the nascent soul realm. No wonder he learned to look at people sideways. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows. He didn't know what he had done to provoke him, so he pointed at him and asked, "Stupid bird, did you say that just now?" Huh. The laughter around him sounded again, but the faces of those people opposite him didn't look so good. They all stood up and shouted at the same time, "Who are you talking about?" "I say him. There are a few holes in the bamboo, but he's still trying to act cool and make a fool of himself." Yu Qianqiu's tone, as well as his hand gesture, was just short of poking his forehead with his finger. If Nongzhu heard this, she would definitely fight with him. What a joke. What kind of people did Yu Qianqiu usually meet, and what kind of things he did? If he randomly picked someone he knew, these guys would look up to him. Just by showing off something he had done, he was able to stun these fellows. Even if it was his own reputation, it was earned through fighting and not through bragging. As long as he flashed his name, he would be able to scare these guys to the point where they would be looking for their teeth on the ground. Nowadays, he had a famous title in the cultivation world, the Butcher of the Cultivation World. The two sides were not at the same level at all. He didn't want to argue with these low-level people at all, so he tried to be polite when talking to them, who knew that the world was full of bastards who looked down on others and bullied the weak and feared the strong. He worked hard and risked his life to climb to this point. It was good enough that he didn't bully others casually. How could he be humiliated by others casually? The cultivator with the bamboo flute began to look at Yu Qianqiu directly. When he found that he couldn't see through his cultivation, his face changed slightly. He stretched out his hands to block the people around him and said softly, "His cultivation is higher than mine." After that, he cupped his hands and smiled apologetically to Yu Qianqiu. The other people's faces also changed. They didn't dare to say anything and sat down quietly. In the cultivation world, those who couldn't stand being bullied were usually short-lived, especially these rogue cultivators who didn't have any background. There was always a higher mountain. If you wanted to be tyrannical, you had to bully the weak. If you wanted to compromise, you had to pretend to be a grandson. This was the general rule of the cultivation world. Even though soul formation experts had to smile carefully when they saw Bai Changchun, there were some things and some people that no one could afford to offend. Huh. The people around them burst into laughter again. Yu Qianqiu stared at them and snorted coldly. If it wasn't for the old guy who he didn't know anything about and didn't want to expose himself too much, with his temper, he wouldn't be able to avoid beating these guys, let alone killing them. What he hated the most was those stupid birds who acted cool without any ability. These kind of people were disgusting and should be killed. At this time, Qin Jiaxing and Fu Chun came back almost at the same time. The two of them were slightly stunned when they saw their boss standing beside the old man. Yu Qianqiu raised his thumb and poked the back of his shoulder. "Who's this old guy? He ignored me when I asked him." Fu Chun walked over and dragged him with a bitter smile. "Boss, this senior is deaf and mute. He can't hear you when you ask him. How can he answer you?" Qin Jiaxing laughed slyly at the side. He had a shifty-eyed face to begin with, and this laugh made him look even more filthy. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Now he understood why everyone laughed at him. He was talking to a deaf and mute stupidly. It would be strange if others didn't laugh. "Did you find an empty room?" Qin Jiaxing scratched his head at Fu Chun and said, "The houses on the east side have all been occupied. With Yu Qianzhou's disturbance, it seems like everyone has rushed over to the Jinshan Kingdom to join in the fun. The weather is not good. Who knows when it will rain? It's understandable that there are so many people. Fu Chun looked at the sky and frowned. There are a few rooms on the west side. Unfortunately, they're occupied by a few women. I discussed with them and wanted them to squeeze in, but they refused. Women? Qin Jiaxing asked with interest. Do they look like water? You're interested? Fu Chun said with disdain. The 6 disciples of the Misty Rain House of Passion Lake. You can go and try. Misty Rain House of Passion Lake. Qin Jiaxing shrunk his head and smiled. Forget it. I can't afford to offend them. Misty Rain House of Passion Lake of Lunanghua. Yu Qianzhou turned around and asked. Seeing the two of them nodding their heads, he paused and asked, how many rooms did they occupy? Fu Chun shook her head. They are arrogant. 6 of them occupied 6 rooms. Qin Jiaxing muttered. The disciples of big clans are awesome. He could hear the helplessness in his voice. Yu Qianzhou looked up at the sky. It might really rain. Although cultivators were not afraid of rain, it was not a good feeling to not have a place to rest on a rainy night. Of course, it would be comfortable to stay in an inn in Gold Casting City. But didn't he want to get some information? Thus, he raised his hand. Bring me there. I will go and talk to them. Qin Jiaxing winked. Boss can handle 2 people at once. It will definitely be settled. He then led the way with Fu Chun. Yu Qianzhou took a few steps and stopped. He turned around and walked to the side of the elder. Although he knew the elder couldn't hear him, he still cupped his fists and bowed. I was ignorant just now. If I offended you, please forgive me. The elder's back was facing him. He continued with his work and probably didn't hear him. Yu Qianzhou didn't mind. He walked in front of the elder and waved his hand. The elder stopped and stared at him coldly. The people around them stared at them. They didn't know what this rascal was trying to do. Yu Qianzhou smiled at the elder to show that he didn't have any bad intentions. He took out a jar of good wine from his storage bag and stuffed it into the elder's arms. He turned around and left. Chapter 532. He had no ulterior motives. He simply felt that this old man's cultivation was not low, but he was willing to give up ostentatious things to do this rough work. He was worthy of respect. His view of life was that he liked to distinguish good and bad from bad, and to see a person's character from little by little. It was that simple. He definitely did not have any ulterior motives towards this old man. Besides, he did not see how this old man could be taken advantage of. However, his actions caused a flash of surprise to flash across the old man's eyes. Then, he threw the wine into his storage bag and continued with his work. The courtyards of large families were indeed deep. After the 3 of them walked around for a while, they could see groups of 2 or 3 chatting on almost every road. The topics were all Yu Qianzhou and matters related to Mist Forest. Yu Qianzhou's face tightened. There was no need to talk about how depressed he was. He had set a trap for himself, and in the end, he had fallen into it. Yes, he had deliberately spread the news about the Myriad Swords Demon Lord in Mist Forest. His goal was to gather a bunch of people into Mist Forest and then ruthlessly slaughter a bunch of them, so that they would not bully others with their numbers. To put it bluntly, he was still angry at being hunted down by thousands of people. Weren't you guys crazy for 2 treasured swords? Then now that I have a treasure of the Myriad Swords Demon Lord, I'm sure it will make you guys even crazier. However, he had miscalculated. This bunch of people had all changed their temperaments. They were very patient and did not make a move. Instead of going to Mist Forest to study how to enter, they had all set their sights on him. Thus, he had tried to seduce them several times in Mist Forest, but they did not fall for it. Instead, they patiently waited for him to come out, prepare to capture him alive, and not prepare to fight him to the death. This caused him to lose his temper, and he could only come out to find a chance to cause trouble. Who knew that after he did not appear, the World Commerce Association became even more despicable. Relying on their wealth, they actually put a bounty of 100 million, causing him to change his appearance again. If he had known this would happen, he would have blackmailed Baikong for a few $100 million. How regretful! What depressed him the most was that in order to make his story about the myriad swords demon lord more believable, he had used the terrain of the basin to make his story more believable. Who would have thought that those guys would be able to guess that it was the Immortal Ascension stage? Everyone knew of the Immortal Ascension stage, but he had never heard of it. Failure. She followed Qin Jiaxing and Fu Chun as they turned left and right in the manor. Finally, they arrived at a courtyard with a single door that was half covered by grapevines. The green grape seeds were thick and plump and had yet to ripen. The three of them walked in. There were indeed 6 rooms inside, 2 facing each other, forming a long cylindrical garden. Looking at the layout, when this family was still prosperous, this should have been a corner where the servants lived. However, in this situation, because it was a private courtyard, there were no people coming and going to disturb him. It was quiet. Under the grape trellis, there was a round stone table. 4 women in pink were sitting, and 2 were standing. Before they came in, they could still hear the chatter inside, but now they were all staring at the 3 people who came in. Yu Qianqiu casually glanced at them. Their looks were not bad, but they were still lacking compared to his woman. As she was sizing them up, a woman who was sitting suddenly stood up and walked over with a sneer on her face. She stared at Fu Chun and coldly said, "What? You still haven't given up?" That woman's eyes were big and bright. She had a round face and a sharp chin. With one look, one could tell that she was not someone to be trifled with. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing subconsciously shrank back. To them, a disciple of the misty rain house of the Passion Lake could kill itinerant cultivators like them as easily as crushing 2 ants. No matter how powerful Boss Niu was, he could not face a colossus like the Misty Rain House. The Misty Rain House was indeed a colossus in the cultivation world, but the 2 of them had underestimated their boss. Not to mention the Misty Rain House, Yu Qianqiu had even made a move on the World Commerce Association, which was known as the most powerful force in the cultivation world. Yu Qianqiu's expression immediately darkened. He looked at the 2 people beside him. These 2 underlings had really made him proud. They were really not presentable, especially in front of a woman. With me here, they actually dared to cower. He could not help but let out a cold humph. He had been eating and drinking well during this period of time. Fu Chun braced herself and stepped forward, saying, "This is our boss. He has personally come to discuss with you." "Boss." That woman laughed unscrupulously and said, "Mere itinerant cultivators dare to call themselves boss in front of the Misty Rain House? You really don't know what's good for you. Come, let me see how much your boss is worth." As she spoke, she walked closer and sized up Yu Qianqiu. Her slender fingers rolled up her sleeves, as if she was really going to teach him a lesson. "Discuss my ass." Yu Qianqiu was enraged. He pulled Fu Chun to the back and stared at the approaching woman with a cold smile. "If you wave that big chest of yours in front of me again, I don't care if you are from the Misty Rain House or not. Be careful that I don't crush it." Once he said that, everyone was shocked. They all suspected that they had heard wrongly. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing looked at each other. The 5 women at the stone table were even more dumbfounded. The woman standing in front of you, Qianqiu, opened her mouth wide, her face full of disbelief. When she saw Yu Qianqiu raise his hand, she cried out in fright and took a few steps back. Then, she said angrily, "How dare you? You dare to humiliate the Misty Rain House?" Misty Rain House. What a great reputation. Yu Qianqiu chuckled coldly and said, "You were the one who bullied me first. Now, you want to put sh*t on me. You can always find a reason to accuse me. But it's fine. I'll play with you anytime. You're courting death." That woman raised her hand, and 3 silver lights appeared in her hand. Upon closer inspection, they were actually 3 thin needles that were about a foot long. Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes. There was actually someone who used such an artifact. "Junior sister, stop." The 5 women at the stone table cried out in surprise. The woman who attacked did not notice, but they realized that they could not see through her cultivation. In addition, from her words, she did not seem to care about the Misty Rain House. Clearly, she was not an ordinary person. This was not their first time in the cultivation world. When they understood that the name of the Misty Rain House could only frighten the timid, when someone really dared to make a move, they still had to avoid the strong and go for the weak. This was something that must be understood in the cultivation world. Otherwise, they would be playing with their lives. However, they seemed to have shouted a little too late. Moreover, in her rage, she did not care about what was right or wrong. A silver light scattered out from her hand, forming a silver rainbow under the green grapevines. It shot straight at Yu Qianzhou's chest. Insignificant tricks. You dare to use them to embarrass yourself. Yu Qianzhou snorted coldly and hit the silver light with his palm. The silver needle went straight into his palm, and his hand immediately clenched into a fist. "Boss!" Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing cried out in surprise. They rushed over and released their flying swords at the same time. The two of them sandwiched Yu Qianzhou in the middle and looked at his fist worriedly. Imagine how it would feel to have a silver needle that was more than a foot long in your hand. Yu Qianzhou glanced at the two of them, and his expression became slightly better. Because of the two of them retreating, he had his stomach full of anger. But now, it seemed that he did not make a mistake in choosing these two as his underlings. At the crucial moment, they still had some conscience and knew to care for him. It was not in vain that he fed them well. Otherwise, he would have made them spit it out with interest. The 5 women at the stone table heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that this person was just a pretentious flower. However, the expression of the woman who released the flying needle changed. Others might not know, but she knew that the moment the flying needle went into the other party's palm, it had completely severed its connection with her. She sized up Yu Qianzhou again, and her expression changed again. She could not see through his cultivation. Knowing that she had encountered a cultivator, she did not dare to act rashly. Yu Qianzhou coldly glanced at the women and snorted. A few core formation stage girls dare to not know the immensity of heaven and earth. One day, I will go to the pavilion of Misty Rain at the Passion Lake to take a look and see how Yu Nantian teaches his disciples. A man who only takes in female disciples. It would be strange if he could teach them well. The Yu Nantian he was talking about was the leader of Lu Nanghua, an expert of the intermediate stage of the demigod realm. He called himself the Pavilion Master of the Pavilion of Misty Rain at the Passion Lake. It was a very elegant title. When these words were spoken, the expressions of the women became somewhat uneasy, especially what Yu Qianzhou did next. It made the women even more frightened. They saw Yu Qianzhou raise one of his clenched fists, and, as he opened his fingers, fine silver powder gently floated down and slowly fell like a drizzle. It faintly formed a layer on the ground. The women were dumbstruck. This was a little too frightening. They did not know how high this person's level of cultivation was. Not only did he dare to open his hand to grab an instrument, but he also crushed the instrument into powder in the blink of an eye. Thinking about what he said just now, it seemed like the pavilion of Misty Rain at the Passion Lake was just a place he could go whenever he wanted, and he even dared to call Yu Nantian by his name. This was not something a normal loose cultivator would dare to say. In addition to this frightening method, the identity of this person in front of them became even more mysterious. Even Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing looked at each other. Their heads were full of doubts. Only now did they realize that this boss was not simple. Yu Qianzhou expressionlessly glanced at them, but he was secretly very proud. Ever since he understood the gold spell, he did not believe that the gold spell could only play tricks like turning stone into gold. That would be too boring. Thinking about how his master asked Nong Zhu to pass on a message to teach him the water spell, he secretly pondered for a long time. The power of the fire spell was being released, and the power of the water spell was being absorbed. Then, the gold spell should also have a way to release its power. Hiding in the basin of the mist forest, he pondered over and over again. After endless attempts, he finally found the way. Only then did he realize that the gold spell could not only absorb gold, it could also absorb the elements of any metal. After experimenting for a while, he finally comprehended an incredible technique. It seemed that as long as it was a metal, it could be instantly decomposed under the power of the gold spell. A piece of gold could be turned into gold powder, and in a flash, it could be condensed back into a piece of gold. Whether it was dark steel or nether iron, in short, He tried all kinds of metals that he had. He did not know if he did not try, but when he tried, he was shocked. This gold spell was too domineering. He tried refining instruments with various metal materials from Chun Feng, but none of them could withstand the power of the gold spell. They were instantly turned into dust. Chapter 533. He didn't know if there were any metals that couldn't be decomposed by the gold art. In any case, none of the metals he had could withstand the power of the gold art. Today was the first time he had tried out his skills. As expected, he shocked his brothers and sisters. It felt great to act tough. "Do you really want to fight me?" Yu Qianshou said disdainfully. The woman who attacked him took a few steps back in panic. She had never seen such a technique before. She believed that even an expert in the final phase of the tribulation passing stage wouldn't be able to crush her magic tool with one palm. In other words, the person in front of her was someone who had surpassed the final phase of the tribulation passing stage. The girls also thought of this. A frightening guess appeared in their minds. This person was an expert in the soul-forming stage. No wonder he dared to call Yu Nantian by his name. At least, based on his cultivation level, he couldn't be an ordinary loose cultivator. The woman looked at her sisters for help. The girls exchanged glances and quickly walked over. They lined up in a row and bowed in unison. One of them was an intelligent woman. She was probably the leader of the group. She cupped her hands and said, "May I know which senior has arrived? We were reckless. Please forgive us." "Not fighting anymore?" Yu Qianshou laughed coldly. "We wouldn't dare." The intelligent woman said respectfully, "Senior's power is not something we can resist. We don't dare to be rash. Please tell us your name. When we return, we will apologize to our masters." Yu Qianshou didn't answer her. Instead, he asked, "What generation are you disciples in the Misty Rain House?" He remembered something recorded in the Jade Archive. Lu Nonggua's Yu Nantian was a man. He was obviously a man, but he only accepted female disciples. It was said that he had a lot of beautiful women under him. All the disciples he taught were of the love generation. The disciples of the disciples were arranged according to the 5 words Passion Lake Misty Rain House. When the girls heard his question, they knew that he wouldn't argue with them anymore. They sighed in relief. However, they didn't know that Yu Qianshou didn't want to make a big deal out of this. It was fine if he acted tough. Otherwise, they would suffer. Smoky Rainbow, Smoky Fei, Smoky Clear, Smoky Rue, Hazy Dawn. The girls took the initiative to report their names. The leading girl cupped her fists and said, "Yin Lan, we are all disciples with the surname Yin." "Ah, so much smoke, it's really suffocating." Yu Qianshou muttered. His gaze swept across the few of them and said, "There's no need to be so courteous. I'll have to trouble everyone to vacate this room." Although his words were tactful, there was an unquestionable tone to them. The girls didn't dare to have any objections and immediately went to make arrangements. The woman who made the move was called Hayes. Seeing Yu Qianshou's eyes sweeping over her big chest, she was scared and trembling. Remembering that the senior had just said that he would crush it, she quickly lowered her head and walked away. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing stood at the side and felt a little unnatural. They no longer dared to talk and laugh like before. They didn't expect that they would follow an unknown master. Yu Qianshou looked at the two of them and frowned. "You too, stiffen your backs in the future. Don't embarrass me." The two of them said yes and subconsciously straightened their backs. It was hard to tell whether they were nervous or excited. They were nervous and excited because this boss was really awesome. Soon, not only were the rooms vacated, but there were 3 of them. The girls gave the best one to Yu Qianshou. When Yu Qianshou arrived at the room, he drove Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing out and asked them to inquire about the news. He was lying on the bed thinking about the problem. He needed to sort out what had happened during this time. If he didn't have a clue and rushed around, sooner or later, he would fall into someone else's trap. There was a woman's body fragrance on the bed. Yu Qianshou's eyelids gradually drooped, and he slowly fell asleep. It was not that he was physically weak, but he didn't need to constantly refine his qi and practice like others. Ever since he formed his gold core, he hadn't meditated to refine his qi. The things in his dantian would automatically refine them. Whenever he felt mentally exhausted, he always liked to sleep to relieve it. Otherwise, his brain wouldn't be able to stop. Other people couldn't see that he was mentally exhausted, so they all thought he was a lunatic. While he was half asleep, he was awakened by the whispers outside. The light in the room was hazy, and the paper window was slightly white. It seemed that the sky was about to turn dark. He got off the bed and opened the door to take a look. Sure enough, it was already dark. The 6 women and 2 men who were huddled together at the door all turned to look at him. "Senior Nyo." The girls saluted together. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing called out, "Boss." Yu Qianqiu glanced at the 2 guys. It seemed that they had already told his name to the girls. But it didn't matter. In any case, it wasn't his real name. From the looks of it, the 2 fellows had already gotten close to the 6 women and were able to get along well with them. "Jijiza, what's the matter?" Yu Qianqiu asked. "Boss, it's like this." Qin Jiaxing scratched his head and said, "There will be a lot of cultivators gathering at Ghost Manor's mountain-leaning pavilion at night. It's a good opportunity to get some information. We want to ask Boss if he wants to go." While they were talking, several groups of people were already flying toward the back of the mountain on their swords. "Oh." Yu Qianqiu looked up at the sky. The sky, which was originally covered with dark clouds, had cleared up. It probably wouldn't rain anymore. After thinking for a while, he nodded and said, "Go, let's join in the fun." Then he pointed at the girls and said, "Don't call me senior anymore." The girls looked at each other. They all knew that he didn't want to expose his identity. The leader, Yin Lan, nodded and said, "Understood. Don't call me senior, call me mister." The girls saluted at the same time and said, "Greetings, mister." The 6 sweet voices made people's bones go numb. Yu Qianqiu quivered. He waved his hand and said, "Fine, fine, fine. Let's go." He threw a flying sword and stepped on it. His cooperative action instantly reduced the pressure on the girls. They couldn't help but cover their mouths and chuckle. They punched and hit Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing with their fists and pushed them away. The 2 of them didn't care about being hit at all. They laughed so hard that they almost couldn't tell north from south. They happily stepped on their swords and chased after Boss. Think about it. If they hadn't met Boss, the Misty Rain Pavilion's female disciples wouldn't have flirted with them. Their days were getting better and better. It was really a happy life as a lone cultivator. The mountain-leaning pavilion was built on a hillside behind Ghost Manor. At the bottom of the hillside was a flat grassland. Under the night sky, there was a big bonfire in the middle of the grassland. There were also many small bonfires around it. The lone cultivators came from all over the world. There were all kinds of countries. Actually, the boundaries between countries didn't mean anything to them. That was because they couldn't get any protection from the countries they were born in. They were just lone cultivators who didn't join any sections. How many cultivators who came from sects would pay attention to them? In the cultivation world, they were like ants. They wandered around alone and didn't care about the boundaries between countries. While they struggled to find longevity, they could only live and get drunk today. The bonfire roasted the wild game, making the faces of the people near it red. The fragrance of the wine wafted in the wind. The wind of the wilderness blew gently. There was also an unorthodox song full of vicissitudes. Some people sang along. It was a different kind of style that lingered under the mountain-leaning pavilion. When Yu Qianqiu and the others arrived, they immediately attracted many people's attention. Most importantly, the 6 pink-clothed girls' uniforms were too eye-catching. Anyone with a bit of knowledge would know that they were from the Misty Rain Pavilion of Lunan's National Love Lake. Yu Qianqiu looked around. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing were on his left and right, and the 6 girls were behind the 3 of them. Many people recognized Yu Qianqiu as the ruffian from earlier in the day, but they didn't understand what he meant. Why would the Misty Rain Pavilion's people surround and protect 3 lone cultivators? Yu Qianqiu's identity immediately made people try to figure it out. In the eyes of the crowd, he also seemed tall and mighty. Many people's eyes were filled with envy. Being able to associate with people from large sects was a matter of great pride for lone cultivators. Usually, when there was a fight between lone cultivators, if the weaker party said that they knew someone from a large sect, the stronger party usually wouldn't dare to be ruthless. Fang Ming, who are these 3 fellows? Look at their shifty-eyed faces. How did they get involved with the Misty Rain Pavilion? The voice wasn't loud, but it was full of jealousy. The person who said this was one of the people who had talked back to Yu Qianzhou during the day. The five of them surrounded a bonfire. The person called Fong Ming was the young man who often played with his flute. The bonfire found a trace of jealousy in his bright eyes. TSK. 6 female disciples from the Misty Rain Pavilion. If each of us could get one of them, we would have at least 100 years to work hard. Another person shook his head and sighed. This made the jealousy in Fong Ming's eyes intensify. This was how the cultivation world was. If a lone cultivator could become Dao companions with someone from a large sect, they would be considered to have pledged allegiance to that sect. Basically, their status as a lone cultivator would end. Usually, female lone cultivators would marry into large sections. However, it was relatively difficult for male lone cultivators to marry female disciples from large sections, unless it was an extremely talented person. First, it had to be someone that the large sect would take an interest in and want to recruit. Second, it had to be a female disciple of a large sect who took an interest in you and begged you to marry them. Otherwise, the chances would be very slim. The relationship between men and women in the cultivation world was very realistic. For many people, if dual cultivation didn't help, they would rather cultivate alone. That way, it would be less burdensome. Yu Qianzhou looked around with a trace of surprise in his eyes. He didn't expect to see such a scene in the cultivation world. Interesting. He raised his hand and said, "Get some firewood. Let's light a bonfire here and join the fun." Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing immediately flew into the mountain to look for firewood. The women were more meticulous and immediately cleaned the grass on the spot. What a joke. Although they were from the Misty Rain Pavilion, they had basically never seen Yunanshan's face. Even if they saw him, they would only look at him from afar. Now that they had a spirit-severing cultivator with the same cultivation as their ancestor, they had to serve him well. Yu Qianzhou didn't care about the gazes around him. Although he looked like a lone cultivator, he was like a crane in a flock of chickens. He crossed his arms and looked at the hillside. There were 4 incandescent cages hanging on the 4 corner pavilions on the hillside. He could clearly see the situation in the pavilion. A one-armed old man was sitting there alone, holding a jar of wine and drinking alone. Chapter 534. The corner of Yu Qianzhou's mouth raised into a smile. He could recognize that the jar of wine was given to him by him. It was indeed a good wine. It was the Yin Wind wine taken from Yu Ji of the Demon Ghost region. It was not a good wine that anyone could drink. The old man's eyes seemed to always look at him intentionally or unintentionally. Their eyes met several times. Yu Qianzhou smiled back, but the old man's eyes were still cold. As a result, Yu Qianzhou was very sullen, so he simply turned around. In front of him, nearly 1,000 people had gathered here. They were drinking and eating to their heart's content, giving off a forthright atmosphere of the Jianghu. This was a feeling that Yu Qianzhou liked very much, and it made him feel much better. Heaven, earth, I am here, drifting, where can I go? Under the starry night sky, under the bonfire, some people bared their teeth and brandished their claws around the bonfire, dancing a strange dance like a big crab. Some people even took out their flying swords and hit them with a clanking sound, singing a wild tune with their mouths. It was a pure man's tune. Pride and frustration were roared out from their throats. Even if they were drunk, they would still wake up. Although the world was big, tomorrow, they would still be unknown little rogue cultivators. You are from the Misty Rain Tower, right? Let us help you. Several people sitting around on the side had been staring here. Seeing the 6 women doing rough work, someone finally couldn't help but start to strike up a conversation. As soon as they opened their mouth, 7 or 8 wolf-like men couldn't wait to get up and rush over here. Get out of here! Hazy Haze roared, scaring several people and making them sit back down. This caused the surrounding people to roar with laughter. Although the laughter was forthright, there was some bitterness hidden in it. It was not known whether they were laughing at those people who were defeated or laughing at themselves for wanting to eat swan meat. Several women were busy around Yu Qianzhou's feet. Yu Qianqiu stood there with his arms crossed, tilting his head to look at the movement just now. There was a faint smile on his face, and he was not angry because of those people's collision just now. In his previous life, he had started out as a commoner, so he naturally had a better understanding of the mentality of the small fry. These people clearly wanted to curry favor with the Misty Rain Pavilion's female disciple, hoping to gain a favorable impression of them and escape their lonely status as independent cultivators. If he was like them now, would he also want to rely on this method to get a higher position? Yu Qianqiu looked into the distance. The answer in his heart was no. He admitted that he was not a good person. Perhaps the methods he used were more bloody, violent, or evil, but he would never use such a method. Because he was ambitious, daring to think, daring to work hard, daring to risk his life, daring to challenge an unfair fate, and unswerving determination to move forward, he was destined to have a bigger stage. If he couldn't succeed, he would just have to die. That was how a man should be, crawling under a woman's skirt, wagging his tail to beg for pity, or to win sympathy, were just small tricks. Once he did that, the road he had to walk would be even more bumpy, and he would have to endure even more humiliation. At this moment, Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing each carried a large bundle of firewood back, and they even carried a pheasant and a wild hare in their hands. They showed off to the women, and their faces were full of smiles. This caused the women to cheer, and they grabbed the firewood and prepared to barbecue it. Yu Qianqiu's eyes flickered as he looked at the two of them, and he backed off, making space in the middle for them to pile the firewood. After the bonfire was lit, the few of them sat around it. The three men here could be said to be a thorn in everyone's side, and they were too enviable. There was a man between every two women, and there were two other women who were busy barbecuing. Yu Qianqiu took out a few jars of good wine and threw them to the few of them. He picked up the wine jars, removed the clay seals, and drank to his heart's content. After that, he put down the wine jars and attentively listened to the conversations around him. Damn it! His limelight had been stolen by these girls. Yu Qianqiu cursed in his heart and realized that the people around him were all talking about the 6 women around him, and it seemed like all of them wanted to get close to him. Fortunately, there was still a group of people talking about business. Forget it. Don't look. No matter how delicious the meat is, we can't bite it. Let's talk about that Yu Qianqiu. What's the use of talking about him? That butcher is hiding somewhere, and it's really easy to find him. Have you heard? World Commerce's Guanzhongcai has already brought a large amount of reward money and is holding down the fort in Gold Casting City. If anyone can get news of Yu Qianqiu, they can directly report it. It's not just Guanzhongcai. I heard that there are also 8 World Commerce's late-stage tribulation passing experts following him. Hee, that's nothing. It's said that Yin Baikong's eldest disciple, Sikong Ju, is leading a large group of World Commerce's experts to await orders. As long as they find Yu Qianqiu, they will personally come out. If that's the case, then World Commerce is determined to get him. Of course, World Commerce's wealth is unparalleled, and World Commerce's influence is the greatest in the world. Yin Baikong's cultivation is one of the top 10 experts in the cultivation world. Hey, look, that woman's breasts are really big. Damn. This can also change the topic. Yu Qianqiu was listening attentively and almost choked to death by these words that were cut off halfway. Following the gaze of those people, he saw that they were talking about hazy haze, which really made him speechless. Woo, 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 woo. Suddenly, an ethereal and graceful sound of a flute rang out in the surroundings, leisurely floating in the night sky. The surrounding noise suddenly quieted down, and everyone looked for the source of the sound. In the end, everyone's gazes all fell on the hillside pavilion at the top of the hill. On the hillside, illuminated by the bonfire, under the incandescent light of the pavilion, a graceful figure was facing downwards. Blue muslin clothes, blue muslin hat, and one couldn't see her true appearance. Her slender, jade-like fingers rose and fell, holding a flute vertically and playing it under the cover of the blue muslin. There was a faint and inexplicable sorrow in the song, and no one knew what the player was thinking. Yu Qianqiu could be considered a person who had a rough understanding of music now. Listening attentively, he felt that this woman's tune was filled with endless loneliness and endless blankness. In reality, this song was a bit out of tune and was completely played at will. After listening for a while, everyone felt very bored and began to discuss again. However, they were all guessing what the woman's appearance under the blue muslin was like. Because just looking at that graceful figure, it was indeed a first-class figure. The blue muslin clothes wrapped around a plump and well-proportioned body. She was neither tall nor short, and her hands were also pure white and crystal clear. However, no one knew what her face looked like. The strangest thing was that the one-armed old man was actually standing behind her in a somewhat respectful manner, slightly bowing his head in silence. Everyone who had some understanding of Ghost Village knew that this old man's cultivation wasn't low. Although he was disabled, with his existence, no one dared to act recklessly in Ghost Village. Actually, all the wandering cultivators who were able to settle down here had to thank this old man. If it wasn't for his existence, Ghost Village would have long been abandoned. It was he who had been quietly taking care of this place and gave everyone a place to settle down. Most importantly, if anyone was chased by enemies, they would be safe if they hid here. It seemed like no one dared to seek revenge in Ghost Village. Such a mysterious old man was now obediently standing behind a woman. This was something that none of the wandering cultivators had ever seen before. Everyone didn't even need to think to know that this woman's origin was definitely not ordinary. Do any of you know where this one-armed old man came from? Yu Qianqiu asked the people around him. In any case, he knew nothing about this old man. Qin Jiaxing withdrew his gaze from the leaning mountain pavilion and shook his head. I don't know. In any case, I heard from some wandering cultivators that he has always been here. I don't know when he started. Yu Qianqiu looked at Fu Chun, but he also shook his head to show that he didn't know. On the other hand, Yen Lan frowned and said, "This senior's identity is very mysterious. He never talks to anyone and doesn't easily hurt anyone. Therefore, there are rumors that he is deaf and mute. As for whether it's true or not, I don't know. Anyway, that's what everyone says." But what? Yu Qianqiu asked curiously. Yen Lan hesitated for a while and said, "The Misty Rain Tower has made it clear that none of our disciples are allowed to cause trouble in Ghost Village. They are also not allowed to be rude to this old man. Otherwise, they will be severely punished." Oh. Yu Qianqiu was surprised and re-examined the one-armed old man. Yen Lan then asked softly, "Mister, with your experience, you still don't know where he came from?" F*CK. I don't have any experience at all. Yu Qianqiu stammered. And, woo. Suddenly, the sound of a flute was heard and joined the flute. It sounded like a flute and a flute were playing together. Everyone looked towards the source of the sound. A person stood up next to the bonfire and blew the flute at the green-veiled woman in the mountain-leaning pavilion. Yu Qianqiu tilted his head and was startled. It was the B*TCH who almost made him attack her earlier in the day. He didn't expect her to be acting cool here again. However, listening to the sound, he realized that the flute in this person's hand wasn't just for fun. He actually knew a bit about music and filled in the gaps in the woman's song. For a moment, it complemented each other and made the song even more pleasant to listen to. However, the four people next to the person seemed a bit disappointed. "Good. It's so nice." They all clapped and cheered. Their flattery could drown an elephant. In the end, the flute in front of the mountain-leaning pavilion stopped playing. The woman had already put down the flute in her hand and seemed to be silently watching the scene below. The sound of the flute immediately became monotonous. Fang Ming also stopped playing and glared at the four people next to him. The four people immediately quieted down awkwardly. Fang Ming straightened his expression and walked out from the crowd. He walked towards the mountain-leaning pavilion and stopped at the foot of the hill. He cupped his hands together and said, "I am Fang Ming, a rogue cultivator. I suddenly heard the sounds of nature and couldn't help but play together with it. I hope you don't mind my rudeness." After he spoke politely, it seemed like the woman didn't want to talk to him anymore. The night wind blew against her green veil, but she didn't move an inch. Suddenly, a burst of laughter came from below. Someone whispered, "Look, another guy who wants to eat swan meat." Chapter 535. Roars of laughter rang out, and Yu Qianqiu shook his head with a bitter smile. Fong Ming's 4 companions couldn't take it anymore. They all stood up and looked around. "Who is it? Come out and speak if you have the guts." "So what if I said it?" 3 people also stood up not far away. One of them sneered, "Is this ghost manor your family's territory? You don't even allow us to speak." Yu Qianqiu looked at the 3 people and found that they were all nascent soul cultivators. The one who spoke was even at the middle stage of nascent soul. These 3 people's cultivations were not low compared to rogue cultivators. When Fong Ming's 4 companions saw who it was, their expressions stiffened and they stood there awkwardly. It was obvious that they were afraid of the 3 people. Fu Chun smiled and softly said, "Boss, these 3 people are somewhat famous among the rogue cultivators. I heard that they are all at the nascent soul stage. The one who spoke is called Tianyi." At the bottom of the hill, Fong Ming's expression changed. He slowly said to his companions, "Don't cause trouble in the ghost manor. All of you sit down." Although these words were said to his own people, everyone could tell that it was a warning to the 3 people. Yu Qianqiu picked up the wine jar and drank a mouthful. He looked at Fong Ming and smiled. Aside from acting cool, this guy's adaptability was pretty good. He was much better than some of the disciples from the big sections. He knew that his side was no match for the other party, so he used the ghost manor to scold his own people. In reality, he was reminding the other 3 that the ghost manor was not a place where they could mess around. After being scolded, the 4 people sat down in embarrassment. Fong Ming turned around and put on a warm smile. He cupped his hands and said, "Miss, please don't take it to heart. They are all uncultured people. Please forgive them for disturbing your mood." Although he didn't criticize them by name, he basically put the label of uncultured on everyone's head. However, there were many people who knew how to be cultured. Even if they didn't know how to be cultured, it wasn't his turn to say it. Why do you have to use everyone as a stepping stone to climb up the tree? Who do you think you are? These words were indeed a little too broad. Even Yu Qianqiu frowned. However, Feng Yu was pure bullsh** to him. He knew that he was constantly cursing and swearing. He had nothing to do with Feng Yu at all. His mentality was different now. If it was a more powerful guy who said that, he might jump out and fight back. But now, a small grasshopper would not be able to overturn the heavens. However, the majority of the people were not happy. They spat and cursed. Even the veiled woman on the hill slowly turned around with the intention of leaving. The one-armed old man stepped aside to make way. The middle-stage nascent soul cultivator, Tianyi, pointed his finger and shouted, "Where did this madman come from? Holding a flute in your hand and blindly blowing it, you dare to pretend to be elegant and look down on the wandering cultivators of the world. If you have the ability, don't ever leave this ghost village." What he meant was, if you come out, I will take care of you. Fong Ming didn't take his threat to heart at all. Instead, the veiled woman was about to leave, and his eyes were filled with anxiety. He forced himself to calm down and laughed loudly. "Brother Tian, what you said is wrong. I once had the chance to meet Mr. Nongzhu of the South Sea Purple Bamboo Forest. I saw that Mr. Nongzhu was unparalleled in elegance and was envious of him. That's why I followed his footsteps. Is he really that bad in your eyes?" Mr. Nongzhu of the South Sea Purple Bamboo Forest? The famous wandering cultivator who is also a middle-stage soul formation cultivator. Mr. Nongzhu? The crowd instantly fell silent. The veiled woman who had just turned around also paused and slowly turned around. She seemed to be sizing up Fong Ming. The one-armed old man also stared at Fong Ming with bright eyes. His words shocked everyone. Fong Ming wore a faint smile on his face as he looked around. However, there was an uncontrollable pride in his eyes. His 4 brothers were even more proud and arrogant. The wandering cultivator's gazes toward Fong Ming instantly turned into that of admiration. The legendary Mr. Nongzhu. To them, he was a person who was far above them. He was someone they could never reach. Not to mention reaching for it. Not many people had even seen it before. Huh? How does this guy know that old bastard Nongju? Yu Qianqiu muttered softly. He pinched his chin and looked at Fong Ming thoughtfully. Although his voice was very soft, Yin Lan still heard it. She looked at Yu Qianqiu with even more respect. This senior Niu was indeed a master. It didn't sound like he was cursing. It seemed like he was very familiar with the legendary Mr. Nongju. Yu Qianqiu didn't know that his unintentional muttering had attracted the attention of a pair of bright eyes. However, the pair of eyes was blocked by the green veil, so no one could see it. At the same time, the one-armed old man in the Leaning Mountain Pavilion also glanced over. The rumor that he was deaf and mute was able to hear such a small murmur. Tian Ye's imposing manner suddenly weakened. He didn't understand Fong Ming. He swallowed with difficulty and said, Mr. Nongju is naturally elegant. I'm talking about you, not Mr. Nongju. But you can't just play a song and say that you know how to be elegant. You can laugh at us. As soon as he finished speaking, he immediately sat down. Obviously, he had no intention of arguing with Fong Ming. There was a bright moon in the sky. From time to time, dark clouds would block the moonlight, and then they would be blown away by the breeze. The bonfires below were crackling. While the crowd was still in shock, Yu Qianqiu calmly picked up a piece of dry wood and threw it into the bonfire. Watching the rising red flames, he sighed in his heart. He used to hang out with the upper-class people in the cultivation world every day. He didn't know how many times he had quarreled with Nongju and how many times he had argued with him. However, when he said the name, Mr. Nongju, so many people didn't even dare to breathe heavily. It was really awesome. What he didn't know was that when he said the name, Yu Qianqiu, it could also shock these rogue cultivators. What a joke. Yu Qianqiu had killed more than 2,000 cultivators from different countries, all of whom were above the original infant stage. He had become famous in the cultivation world. He was the butcher of the cultivation world. What was different from Nongju was that one was famous all over the world, and everyone was in awe of him. On the other hand, he was famous all over the world, and everyone was afraid of him. Two pairs of eyes on the hillside had been secretly watching his actions. Compared with the shocked expressions of the crowd, his indifferent look seemed a little out of place. Brother Tian, you're right. I really can't be compared with Mr. Nongju. I was rude. Fong Ming chuckled and blamed himself. But looking at him, he didn't seem to blame himself at all. He was obviously proud. Looking around, he saw that the veiled woman was also listening. So he said with great interest, Of course, although I'm not elegant, I've been deeply influenced by Mr. Nongju's elegant demeanor since I met him. So I made up my mind to learn from famous songs everywhere. My hard work paid off, and finally, I got a few peerless masterpieces. I wonder if you're interested in listening to them? The elegant demeanor of Nongju? Why don't I know about it? What's the difference between that guy and a rascal? Elegant my ass. Yu Qianqiu's face twitched, and he cursed in his heart. The crowd looked at each other and found that this place had become a place for him to perform. But they didn't know what relationship he had with Mr. Nongju, so they just stopped talking. Fong Ming's brothers naturally wouldn't let Fong Ming remain silent. They all cheered. Of course we do. We're waiting to listen. I wonder what peerless masterpieces they are. Fong Ming laughed heartily and spoke to the crowd in a graceful manner. Everyone is probably here for Yu Qianqiu, right? But you should know that although Yu Qianqiu is cruel and merciless and is hunted by many countries, he's a peerless genius in music. Yu Qianqiu, hearing this, everyone immediately whispered to each other. They really hadn't heard anything about Yu Qianqiu. You asked me, I asked you, but no one had heard of him. Yu Qianqiu slightly opened his mouth in astonishment. He thought to himself, Why are you talking about me? Could it be that the peerless masterpieces he mentioned are... He vaguely guessed something. The awkward atmosphere was stirred up in an instant. Everyone was quite interested in the topic of Yu Qianqiu. Not many people here know about these songs. I spent a lot of effort to get them from the Chinese cultivation world. Fong Ming suddenly shook his head and sighed. The song White Fox is heartbreaking. I really want all the heartless men in the world to listen to it. The song Mandarin Duck and Butterfly Dream makes people feel like they're in a gentle dream. It's as if the clouds are parted and the blue sky is revealed. When the song ends, people wake up, but the tear stains are still there. The song, laughing at the world of mortals, laughs at all the funny things in the world. The vicissitudes of life are like passing wind and clouds. All I want is to be free and unfettered in this life. When the veiled woman at the side of the pavilion heard these words, her shoulders seemed to subconsciously move, and Yu Qianqiu was even more dumbfounded. Wow, why didn't I know that these 3 songs were so charming? This guy's eloquence was just too good. If he can't get a girl, then he's really heartless. I'll just bang my head against the wall and die. Everyone present was tempted by his words. They couldn't wait to ask him to hurry up and sing to see what kind of song could make him so melancholy. However, they wanted to continue listening to his next words, so they didn't disturb him. He sighed and said, Yu Qianqiu, what kind of person are you? Perhaps being unruly and ruthless is just your surface. Underneath that strong exterior of yours is a sentimental heart. The world is drunk, but you're the only sober one. You walk through the turbid world with cold eyes. Do you have a bosom friend? Sigh. I, Fong Ming, have been longing for you for a long time. It's a pity that I've only heard of you. You're a peerless genius. What a pity. Damn it. Is this stupid bird who acts cool my bosom friend? Why didn't I know I was so good? Yu Qianqiu bit his lips and his face twitched. He was almost moved to tears by Fong Ming's words. He cursed in his heart. What the hell? Chapter 536. If it wasn't for the fact that Qin Ming wanted to pick up girls and raise Yu Qianqiu's ego, Yu Qianqiu would have been moved by him. He grabbed the wine jar and took a big gulp. The girls clenched their fists, their faces full of longing. Big-breasted Haze muttered to herself, So Yu Qianqiu is this kind of person? Beside her, Misty Rainbow clenched her teeth and said, I wonder if we'll have the chance to meet him. The 2 of them seemed to have forgotten that they were here to gather information about Yu Qianqiu and then provide it to their sect to capture. Pooh! Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but spit the wine on the bonfire. The fire rose with the help of the wine. Seeing everyone looking at him in surprise, he awkwardly explained, The fire is a bit small. They all looked at the bonfire and discovered that it wasn't small at all. However, they still added firewood to it. Qin Jiaxing added firewood as he muttered, Look at your infatuated faces. That Yu Qianqiu only knows how to sing a song. He doesn't even know what he's singing about, yet you guys are so excited. Pooh! Yu Qianqiu spat out the wine he just drank. He expressionlessly wiped his mouth and pointed at the bonfire. Make the fire bigger. Roast the meat a bit more and make it crispy. It's almost done. Any more and it'll be burnt. Everyone share it. The others obediently followed his instructions. The pavilion was quiet. Only their area was different from the others. Spitting wine, playing with fire, and chattering nonstop, it was hard not to attract attention. The atmosphere that Fong Ming had painstakingly created was now a complete mess. Everyone's gazes were no longer focused on him. Instead, they all looked at the bonfire where Yu Qianqiu was. These people were very busy, happily distributing the roasted hare and roasted chicken. Bastard, Qin Jiaxing, where's the roasted chicken? Did you take it all for yourself? Fuck, have you ever seen a chicken with 9 legs? I don't even have one myself. These 2 people's words were too vulgar. Yu Qianqiu immediately said in annoyance, F***CK, be more civilized. If you don't get a leg, go gnaw on a chicken's butt. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing immediately lost their temper. After a while, the 9 of them were chewing and gulping down mouthfuls of wine from time to time. The few of them grinned and said that it was delicious. However, the few of them suddenly realized that something was wrong with the atmosphere. They raised their heads almost at the same time and saw that everyone was looking at them. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He waved at the crowd and said, Sorry, we'll eat first. You can continue to talk about Mr. Nongzhu and Yu Qianqiu. Right? Didn't you say you were going to sing a song? Come on, sing. I need a song to help me get drunk. The people around him burst into laughter, as if they thought Fong Ming was an actor. On the hillside, the red lips under the green veil raised a beautiful arc obviously. She was also smiling, but the others could not see it. If it were someone else, Fong Ming would have taught him a lesson. However, it was this guy who wanted to teach him a lesson during the day. Fong Ming could only swallow his anger. However, his face was not good. He said in a low voice, "It's okay if you don't take me seriously, but don't tarnish Mr. Nongzhu and Yu Qianshou." This guy was good at talking. It was obvious that he was using the two gods to suppress the other party. However, when it came to talking, Yu Qianshou was not afraid of anyone at all. Moreover, Yu Qianshou did not take the two gods seriously at all. It was useful to scare other rogue cultivators, but it was really a mistake to scare Yu Qianshou. Is there something wrong with your brain? Don't use others to support you. When did I tarnish Nongzhu and Yu Qianshou? Yu Qianshou thought that he had never seen someone so protective of his grandson. He drank a mouthful of wine, picked up a half-eaten drumstick, pointed at Fong Ming, and said, "Anyway, even if I tarnish Nongzhu and Yu Qianshou, it's none of your business. I did tarnish them. What's wrong with that? If the two bastards have a problem with it, tell them to come to me. Don't meddle in other people's business." His words were so arrogant that Fong Ming was speechless. He did not mention Yu Qianshou. Fong Ming thought that he could scare Nongzhu by mentioning Nongzhu, but he dared to curse Nongzhu by mentioning her name. It seemed that he was not afraid that his words would fall into Nongzhu's ears. It was impossible for Yu Qianshou to be afraid. He had scolded Nongzhu many times in front of her, not to mention behind her back. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing looked at each other. Their boss was so awesome. No wonder his family name was Niao. Yin Lan and the other girls were full of admiration. This senior might be even more powerful than Mr. Nongzhu. Otherwise, who would dare to curse a master at the middle stage of Huashan realm like this? The place suddenly became quiet. Only the crackling of the bonfire could be heard. Everyone was searching for the name Niao Yud in their minds, but it seemed that they had never heard of him. On the other side, Tianai, who was scared by Fong Ming mentioning Nongzhu, felt even more ashamed now. Look at Fong Ming's courage, and then look at his own courage. Fong Ming's face darkened as he stared at the man who continued to eat and drink after cursing him. Suddenly, as if he had thought of something, he tossed the flute in his hand into his storage pouch and pulled out a zither. Then he slowly sat down cross-legged in front of the veiled woman on the hill. Seeing that he put the guqin on his knees, everyone was immediately interested. They knew that he was going to play the song he mentioned just now. Yu Qianshou glanced at him and thought, this guy is really talented. He can play both the flute and the guqin. Although cultivators from different countries are hunting Yu Qianshou, I still think that he is a peerless genius that only appears once in 1,000 years. I love music, but I have no chance to learn from him in person. The few songs that I have learned are only paraphrased by others. I didn't get the complete song, so I had to compose a song myself. I hope I won't disturb you. As soon as Fong Ming finished speaking, his four brothers cheered again. He continued, "It is said that the song White Fox was written by Yu Qianshou when he first joined the cultivation world of Huaxia. He met a white fox that had been cultivating for 1,000 years. Feeling the misery of the fox's life, Yu Qianshou gave it to the fox girl. This song has been sung in the cultivation world of Huaxia for a long time. Please listen carefully." The sound of the zither rang out slowly. After a prelude, Fong Ming sang softly with the sound of the zither. "I am a fox that is cultivated for 1,000 years. 1,000 years of cultivation, 1,000 years of solitude. In the dead of night, can anyone hear me crying? In the dim light, can anyone see me dancing? The night was quiet, and the song was lonely." It had to be said that Fong Ming was indeed skilled. As expected of a specialist, his singing was indeed touching. Even Yu Qianshou's eyes were filled with confusion. He recalled the first time he met Bai Sujin. As soon as the song was played, everyone was immersed in the heartbreaking song and music. From the lyrics, they could feel the misery of the white fox that had been cultivating for 1,000 years. The heart-wrenching scene of "Can I Dance for You Again" appeared in everyone's minds. Yu Qianshou was awakened by the girls beside him. They could not help but let out soft sobs. Their eyes were red and glistened with tears. The rest of the people were also sighing. When the song was over, everyone was still immersed in the song. They shook their heads. It was a very emotional scene. Senior sister, that white fox is so pitiful. The hot-tempered Haze threw herself into Yanlan's arms and cried bitterly. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing were also in a daze. They had long forgotten to eat the roasted meat in their hands. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He could not help but sigh at the lack of spiritual food in this world. A song could move people to this extent. Fang Ming glanced at the girl on the hillside. It seemed that she did not have any reaction. Even if she did, it was blocked by the curtain of green silk. He looked around and said loudly, "What do you guys think of this song? Is Yu Qianqiu a genius?" "He is." The group of rogue cultivators roared in response. Some of them even exclaimed, "I didn't expect this." That butcher of the cultivation world actually knows how to play this song. Not only does he know how to play, even an uncouth man like me likes it. It's completely different from the sound I used to hear. It makes me want to sleep. Tis TSK. If I have a chance, I really want to meet this Yu Qianqiu and see what he looks like. Damn it, I'm sitting right here. You guys have eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. Yu Qianqiu looked around. For the first time, he felt that being Yu Qianqiu was good. He wanted to stand up and tell everyone that he was Yu Qianqiu. The song is born from the heart. How bad can a person who can make such a song be? He must have been forced to do it. Fang Ming sighed. The result made everyone sigh again. Everyone knew that the reason why Yu Qianqiu killed the 2,000 cultivators was because the sects were hunting him for his treasures. Now that they thought about it again, they felt some sympathy for him. That Yu Qianqiu was forced to kill them because he had no other choice. The dream of the mandarin ducks and butterflies. It is said that this song was given to the vixen after Yu Qianqiu composed it. After hearing this song, the vixen's sorrow disappeared and she floated away. No one has seen her since. At this point, Fang Ming shook his head and sighed. Speaking of which, although the white fox's fate was tragic, 2 of the 3 songs composed by Yu Qianqiu were actually given to her. It's really enviable. That white fox has no regrets in her life. Sigh, how enviable. I wonder who else in this world can make Yu Qianqiu compose a 4th song. He didn't know that Yu Qianqiu had actually made a song public when he was training in the Demon Ghost region. However, in order to hide the secret of the training in the Demon Ghost region, the sects strictly forbade their disciples from mentioning it, so the song didn't spread outside. Fang Ming quickly sing Butterfly and Mandarin Duck Dream. This time, there was no need for Fang Ming's 4 brothers to liven up the atmosphere. Everyone couldn't wait any longer and shouted, "Yes, yes, quickly sing it." Yu Qianqiu looked around and saw the 6 women staring at Fang Ming with shining eyes like 6 female dogs in heat. This made Yu Qianqiu curse in his heart. Damn it, singing my song to show off. He suddenly remembered that he was also a pirate singer and was speechless. How dare I disobey everyone's orders? Fang Ming smiled and plucked the strings of the zither. After the beautiful prelude, he sang with a hint of melancholy. Yesterday was like the east flowing water, far away from me and can't stay. Today my heart is in chaos and worries. If I cut the water with a knife, it will flow even more. If I drink to drown my worries, it will make me worry even more. If I cut the water with a knife, it will flow even more. If I drink to drown my worries, it will make me worry even more. Under the night sky, the bonfire flickered. The group of people was relaxed and happy, and their hearts trembled with every word of the lyrics. The feeling of cutting the water with a knife, the feeling of powerlessness to drown one's worries, seemed to have been experienced by everyone. The song vividly interpreted the artistic conception. It couldn't be described with the word wonderful. No one had ever heard such a divine song. At the end of the song, many people looked at the wine pot in their hands and murmured, "If I drink to drown my worries, it will make me worry even more." What a beautiful song. The tears on Hazy Haze's face hadn't dried yet. She crossed her arms and said in annoyance, "Yu Qianqiu, where are you? It would be good if I could see you. You can't die." The other women were even more stunned. Even Yanlan murmured as if she was in a dream, "If I cut the water with a knife, it will make me laugh even more." This Yu Qianqiu is really a wise man who has seen through all kinds of life. In just a few words, he has described the joys and sorrows of a man and a woman. Every word is a gem. Dream of mandarin ducks and butterflies. The title of the song is so beautiful. Yin Fei bent her legs and supported her chin with her hands. Her eyes flashed with dreamy brilliance and said, "I really want to see what Yu Qianqiu looks like now, yes." Yin Qing said in a daze, "I think he must be a handsome man. A group of love-struck fools. I'm sitting right next to you." Yu Qianqiu rolled his dead fish eyes and looked back and forth at the 6 women unwillingly. Then he took a big bite of the drumstick in his hand. He looked like he wanted to tear the drumstick into pieces. After a few big bites, he put the bone in his mouth and chewed on it. Fong Ming smiled and looked around. The atmosphere was finally under his control again. Tonight was destined to be his night. He said in a clear voice, "What do you think after listening to these 2 songs? Now you know that what I said is true." "Not bad. This Yu Qianqiu is really something, a real talent, a real master. Even I, a rough guy, admire him from the bottom of my heart. Good song. He really is a genius." Everyone's praises came one after another. It was practically endless. Fong Ming nodded and said, "The song is good, the melody is good, and every word of the lyrics is like a jewel. I'm afraid only Yu Qianqiu could come up with such a song. Moreover, he matched it so well that it's unforgettable. What's more, it's said that this is Yu Qianqiu's impromptu work. He's really a genius." Yu Qianqiu drank his wine gloomily. He really did not know what to say. This was the first time he was praised by so many people, especially Fong Ming, who praised him as if he was the best in the world. Yu Qianqiu should be happy, but he could see that Fong Ming was clearly playing trick. He was pouring water on Yu Qianqiu and then propping up his broken boat. As the saying goes, a good song needs a good tune. Fong Ming said at the beginning that he got the song from the cultivation world in China. The tune was not complete, and he composed it himself. The more he made everyone think that this song was rare, the more they would think that his talent would be revealed when they thought about it. This kid is really something. He's even more shameless than me. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly in his heart. Fong Ming composed the tune. It's obvious that he did it step by step. He's bullying everyone here because they haven't heard it before. I'm afraid he's going to play some tricks to make his wish come true. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the veiled woman on the hillside. She was the target that Fong Ming was trying his best to capture. I won't allow any bastard to take advantage of me to pick up girls. What he didn't know was that the eyes behind the veil were staring at him, especially his cultivation that could not be seen through. It was very eye-catching. Basically, those who had interacted with him for a period of time knew that he was born this way. It was not because of a momentary lapse in judgment. Fong Ming, let's not talk about it. Sing that, laughing at the world of mortals again. Yeah, sing it quickly. Let's hear it again. The group of people were already addicted to it. They could not wait to hear the 3rd song. So they all urged. However, just as Yu Qianqiu expected, that guy began to play the trick of fishing for mermaids. Fong Ming slowly stood up and put away his guqin. He cupped his hands and apologized to the crowd. "Everyone, I'm really sorry. Let's stop here for today. We'll talk again if there's a chance in the future. Because this 3rd song is a masterpiece among masterpieces. If I don't adjust my emotions before singing it, it'll be a stain on this masterpiece. I really don't want to do such a thing. I hope that you won't force it. It's not like you can force it." As soon as these words came out, everyone sighed with regret. Someone even shouted, "How about tomorrow? At most, I'll wait another day before I leave. I want to listen to this masterpiece among masterpieces of masterpieces." Fong Ming replied in a cultured and refined manner, "Let's talk about it another day, another day." He did not give a definite answer from beginning to end. As he said this, he walked back to where he came from. His 4 brothers cheered and cheered loudly. "You're called Fong Ming, right?" Suddenly, a cold snort sounded out. Fong Ming paused and looked toward the source of the sound. It was the guy who opposed him during the day. He reluctantly nodded and said, "That's right. What can I do for you?" "Advice my ass." Yu Qianqiu looked him up and down in disdain. He said, Fong Ming. From the sound of this name, it should be a righteous person who does things openly and honorably. It's a disgrace to a liar like you with this name. Everyone was taken aback. They did not know where he was coming from. Fong Ming's expression changed. He said in a deep voice, "What did I lie to you about? Isn't this the first time we've met? Kid, you're asking for trouble by being so stubborn in front of me." Yu Qianqiu sneered and said, "Let me ask you. You said that in the song you just sang, the zither song was composed by you?" Fong Ming was nervous, but he forced himself to be calm. "That's right. Hee. As luck would have it, I've heard Yu Qianqiu sing these two songs with my own ears. Although his unparalleled and divine skills are indeed thousands of times better than yours, and you are like trash compared to him, but why do I feel that the tunes you two play are almost the same? Was it you who composed them? Could it be that Yu Qianqiu stole your zither song?" Yu Qianqiu said with extreme malice. Chapter 537. Of course, at the same time, he didn't forget to praise himself. No one knew who he was anyway, so he should praise him. Don't hold back. He praised Yu Qianqiu to death. Everyone was in an uproar when they heard this. Then, they began to whisper to each other and looked at Fong Ming in confusion. After listening to him play two songs, everyone was still thinking about it. Although they knew that he was showing off, they were still amazed by him. Now that they suddenly heard this, they felt as if they had swallowed a fly. Fong Ming's four brothers stood up and waved their arms in anger. "How dare you? Where did this madman come from? Niu Yud, don't spout nonsense." Yu Qianqiu turned to the four of them and said indifferently, "Don't think that no one dares to touch you in the ghost village. I don't care if it's a ghost village or a god village. Try pointing fingers at me again. Do you believe that I won't pull out your tongues and knock out your teeth right now?" Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing winked at each other. They seemed to be a little excited. This boss was too awesome. The six women looked at each other. They already knew that Niu Yud was a soul formation stage master, so they didn't doubt that he would do what he said. The four men's faces were flushed red. They didn't dare to make the first move, so they definitely wanted to save face with their words. However, they were stopped by Fong Ming. Fong Ming was a smart man. He could tell that this person's words and actions weren't just for fun. His eyes were filled with indifference, as if he viewed human life as nothing more than grass. He would definitely kill anyone if they didn't get along. Most importantly, they might not be a match for this person. Why do you want to cause trouble for me again and again? Have I offended you in the past? Fong Ming asked loudly. It was a very smart question. The meaning behind it was obvious. He was telling everyone that this wasn't the first time this person had caused trouble for him. He was slandering him again. Those who saw the two arguing during the day also nodded slightly. They suspected that this Niu Yud was really causing trouble for Fong Ming. "Cause trouble for you?" Yu Qianqiu said disdainfully. "Do you think you're worth my trouble? If I really wanted to cause trouble for you, you would have lost your life long ago. How could you have the chance to swindle and deceive everyone?" He was telling the truth. If it wasn't for the fact that he wanted to keep a low profile, he wouldn't have let Fong Ming off during the day. In his eyes, the people of the cultivation world had already obtained far, far more than mortals, especially those who harbored evil intentions. It was fine if they didn't cause trouble, but once they did, the harm they suffered would be much greater than that of mortals. Therefore, to him, it was better to kill than to spare. The word sympathy was something he had never even thought about. However, he thought that he was low-key, but in reality, he was the kind of person who couldn't be low-key even if he wanted to. His entire body was covered with hard thorns that would stab people no matter where he was placed. With this kind of character, how could he keep a low profile? Who knows? I believe that you have the ability to kill me. Fong Ming glanced at the veiled woman beside the Leaning Mountain Pavilion and said in a deep voice, "You keep saying that I'm a liar, but you should at least show me the evidence. You can't accuse me of being a liar just because of what you said. That's a little too ridiculous." He could be considered to have swallowed his anger. Even after being ridiculed, he still maintained a certain degree of politeness. There was nothing he could do about it. The other party dared to turn against him, but he didn't dare to. "Evidence." Yu Qianqiu raised an eyebrow and said, "I've already said that I've heard Yu Qianqiu play and sing these two songs with my own ears. This is the best evidence." Then I'll have to trouble you to prove that you've heard Yu Qianqiu play and sing these two songs, Fang Ming said calmly. That's easy. Yu Qianqiu casually waved his hand and said, the last time I was still in Dayang City, Third Xian from Lingfang Valley brought Yu Qianqiu to visit me. At that time, the three of them were in high spirits after drinking, and the Thousand Sorrows Zither song livened up the mood. They played and sang more than 10 songs in a row, and those songs were like the sounds of nature, making people gasp in admiration. Among those songs, you played and sang. If you don't believe me, you can go to Lingfang Valley and ask Third Xian. Then you'll know that I'm not lying. Fang Ming choked and was stunned. Asking him to look for Third Xian, he had to have the qualifications to do so. Who was Third Xian? He was an expert in the late tribulation passing stage. His brother was in the early soul forming stage, and his master was one of the 4 great men of the cultivation world. How could he have the qualifications to ask questions? It was already good enough that he could meet him. The itinerant cultivators looked at each other, trying to figure out Niu Yud's background. They had never heard of this person before, and even Third Xian and Yu Qianqiu wanted to visit him. It was obvious that he had an extraordinary background. Although Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing didn't say a word, their faces were filled with pride. The two of them basked in the glory of their boss and enjoyed the feeling of being the center of attention for the first time. In the past, even among the itinerant cultivators, the two of them were nameless people. How could they receive so much attention? This feeling was really good, as if he had followed the right person. Fang Ming wanted to say something, but stopped himself. In the end, he shut his mouth. Even if he was stubborn, he had to have the capital to do so. Not to mention that he couldn't see through the other party's cultivation. His background was even more mysterious. This kind of person was not someone a small itinerant cultivator like him could afford to offend. If he lost his life before he could eat the swan meat, it would be really not worth it. However, he saw a scene that he shouldn't have seen. Just as Niu Yud was talking about Third Brother Xian, the masked woman next to the mountain-leaning pavilion with a green veil lightly took a few steps forward. With every step she took, the night breeze brushed against the green muslin. Under the influence of the wind, the green muslin skirt wrapped around the contours of her slender legs. The exquisite curves on her upper body were even more captivating. The hazy curves could make all things pale in comparison with each step she took, and each step was enough to stop one's breathing. Everyone followed Fang Ming's gaze and held their breaths, staring fixedly at the woman. Although this mysterious woman's face was covered, the green veil was unable to conceal the allure of her body as she moved. They did not see her devastatingly beautiful face, nor did they hear her melodious words. This was because she had not said a word since she arrived. There was no pretentiousness to deliberately display the charm of a woman. Everything was done so inadvertently. With a few graceful steps, she vividly interpreted the word beauty. The mountain-leaning pavilion under the night sky, the incandescent light, and the one-armed old man. Everything became an illusory background. Everyone's attention was focused on the woman in green veil. The bright moonlight was blocked by the drifting dark clouds, and the moon seemed to be too shy to peep at the woman below. Bonfires were lit everywhere, shining brightly. The burning firewood made crackling sounds, as if to remind everyone to come back to their senses. However, everyone was still immersed in a daze. After a long time, the group of people who had almost suffocated to death finally remembered the matter of breathing. They swallowed their saliva and took big gulps of air mixed with the fragrance of wine. However, their gazes were still fixed on the woman in green veil. Damn it! She could bring disaster to the country and people by not showing her face. This could be considered as putting the moon to shame. Yu Qianqiu, who came back to his senses, looked up at the sky and found that even the moon had disappeared. He drank a mouthful of wine, looked around at the group of people who were stunned, and shook his head with a bitter smile. In his mind, the few women who were waiting for his return appeared, and he felt that he owed them too much. The night wind was a little cold, but the bonfires were still burning. Yu Qianqiu's body leaned back slightly. He supported himself with one hand on his back and one of his legs retracted. His other hand was placed on his knee, holding a jar of wine and gently shaking it. The wine was poured into his mouth from time to time, and the bright red light from the fire made the faint longing in his eyes and face unmistakable. The masked woman in green veil was watching his every move. When she found that he did not fit in with the crowd, her eyes revealed a trace of surprise. In her impression, there was no need to mention her own charm, and it was rare to see such a man. Of course, there was also that person, that arrogant legendary figure, who was also an exception. That person was too arrogant to the bones. However, that person did indeed have the qualifications to be arrogant to the point of ignoring everything. What beauty, in his eyes, was just a skeleton. When it was time to make a move, there was no reason to talk. So beautiful, Yinxia said dreamily. Looking at the dazed looks of the men around her, she slightly lowered her head to look at the big chest that she was usually proud of, and subconsciously shrank her chest. For the first time, she found that it was really stupid to rely on big breasts to attract men's attention. Look at him, he just took a few steps, and the effect was far more attractive than her own chest. It is very beautiful. Yinlan let out a sigh. After all, these women were women, so they were the first to come back to their senses, but their faces all showed a look of shame. The sound of the wine being drunk attracted the eyes of the women. The women were surprised to find that Senior Niu Yud was indeed a master, and he was not on the same level as the stinky men around him. The charm of the masked woman was hard to resist, even for women like them. Unexpectedly, Senior Niu Yud did not even look at her, and drank leisurely by himself. He was really a knowledgeable senior. Sir, do you think that the masked woman is not beautiful? Yinxia was a little curious and dared to ask. The eyes of the women were cast together, and they also wanted to know the opinion of this senior. Yu Qianzhou came back to his senses and asked, "What?" Yinxia timidly asked the question again. Yu Qianzhou didn't think much of it and said, "It should be okay. Women are beautiful in my eyes, but I haven't seen her face. How do I know if she is beautiful or not?" Yinxia slightly pouted, as if she was not very satisfied with this answer, and asked again, "Does her only look at the face to see whether a woman is beautiful or not? Her figure is also very important." Yu Qianzhou was stunned. His eyes glanced at her chest, and then sent the wine jar in his hand to her sensitive part, and said with a smile, "Of course, the figure is very important. I like women with big breasts. Just looking at them makes me feel good, and taking them off is even more. Cough. That the figure is very important, and your figure is very beautiful. Hee. Very beautiful, very beautiful." Chapter 538. Hazy Haze's face turned red. Under the light of the fire, it became more and more red. She covered her chest with her arms, trying to block Yu Qianzhou's gaze. She whispered, "I'm not talking about me." The other women were seduced by these words and subconsciously looked at their chests. They also crossed their arms to cover their chests. Their cheeks were all red, and they all muttered in their hearts, "This Senior Niu doesn't know how to restrain himself when acting like a hooligan." Many people's gazes had already been attracted by the three words big breasts. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing were even more dumbfounded. The two of them really didn't expect that their boss would actually dare to say such a thing in front of so many people. They immediately threw the veiled beauty to the back of their minds and looked at this rare animal like their boss. "What are you looking at?" Yu Qianzhou glared at the two of them, and then awkwardly explained to Hazy Haze, "It was a slip of the tongue, a slip of the tongue. I absolutely didn't mean anything else." However, the figures of the women shrank a little bit to guard against thieves, especially their eyes. They obviously didn't believe that he had made a slip of the tongue. "Damn, I obviously want to flatter you, but you actually treat me as a pervert." Yu Qianzhou opened his mouth and shook his head speechlessly. He was too lazy to explain, and he couldn't explain it clearly. Many people around him snickered, laughing that he was really a kindred spirit. If someone was more careful, they would find that the direction of the veiled woman's veil had changed a little. It seemed to be facing the direction of Yu Qianqiu. Obviously, she had noticed this Niu Yud. Fang Ming always paid attention to her movements and naturally noticed this. Just now, the beauty of the mysterious woman's graceful steps had left an indelible mark in his heart. Before, he had the heart to climb high branches, but now he had the impulse to get close to her. This couldn't be blamed on him. A graceful lady was a gentleman's desire. Any normal man would like beautiful women. However, if he was jealous of a beautiful woman, he had to consider the consequences. Fang Mingbin had already suppressed his irrational action of clashing with Yu Qianqiu, but after seeing the peerless elegance of this beautiful woman, his heart began to beat wildly. Even if this woman did not have a mysterious background, it would be enough to satisfy him for the rest of his life if he could obtain her, not to mention that she might have a profound background. Originally, there were already signs of success when the conditions were right, but this Niu Yud forcefully stopped it. Moreover, such a peerless beauty had actually shifted her attention from him to Niu Yud. This was intolerable. Fang Ming's face was livid and shouted, "Niu Yud, how dare you say such obscene words in public? Aren't you afraid of being a disgrace?" Yu Qianqiu was slightly startled. Just now, he had thought that this fellow was tactful. He did not expect that this fellow would openly flip out at him. Yu Qianqiu did not know what was wrong with him. She sized him up in confusion and said, "That's strange. What does it have to do with you that I'm a disgrace to cultured people? I'm a disgrace to cultured people. So why are you, a liar, lecturing me?" "Huh, since you keep saying that I'm a liar, then show me something to prove it. Don't spout nonsense. Do you think everyone in the world is a fool?" Fang Ming threw caution to the wind. He was sure that the mysterious woman was also someone who loved music. Otherwise, she wouldn't have played the flute alone in this lonely night. Fang Ming's bet was very simple. As long as the veiled woman was a person who loved music, she would not put herself in danger, because there was still a song to be sung. Did she not want to hear it? Moreover, the one-armed old man who guarded the Ghost Manor probably wouldn't allow anyone to commit murder in the Ghost Manor. Everyone broke out in a cold sweat for Fang Ming. Offending such a person was truly not a wise move. Fu Chun, Qin Jiaxing, and the girls looked at Fang Ming as if they were looking an idiot. In their eyes, a mere vagrant cultivator dared to provoke a soul formation stage cultivator. Wasn't he courting death? Oh. Yu Qianqiu put down the wine jar in his hand and sat up straight. He raised his hand to touch his forehead helplessly. The copper bracelet on his wrist was very eye-catching. He said disdainfully, "I, Niu Yud, have always won people over with my virtue. Tell me, how can I prove it so that you will be convinced?" Fang Ming's face tensed up. "Niu Yud, I don't know if you know music or not, but since you insist on proving that I'm a liar, don't say that I'm making things difficult for you. If you can sing a song composed by Yu Qianqiu, then it will be a strong proof." He secretly prepared another excuse in his mind. If Yu Qianqiu really knew how to play and sing, and if it was the two songs that he had just sung, then he would say that Yu Qianqiu was merely imitating him. If it was another song, then no one here would have heard it. At that time, he could firmly deny that it was a song composed by Yu Qianqiu. "Oh, that's it. As long as I can sing a song composed by Yu Qianqiu, then I can prove that you're a liar?" Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes. In his previous life, he was a master of conspiracies. Even if Niu Yud did not leave a way out, he had already prepared for the worst. He had seen many people like Niu Yud. He snorted coldly and said, "What if you don't admit that it's a song composed by Yu Qianqiu that no one has ever heard of before?" Fang Ming's thoughts were exposed, but he still gritted his teeth and said, "As long as you don't imitate someone else's song, then it'll be fine." Yu Qianqiu's song has a different tune than the one we're familiar with. You'll know it once you hear it. As soon as he finished speaking, he heard the sound of a lazy zither. Everyone looked toward the source of the sound. Unknowingly, the zither had appeared on Niu Yud's knees. He was casually playing with it with one hand. Everyone's eyes lit up. They knew that a good show was about to begin. Since Niu Yud could carry a zither with him, he must be an expert in this field. Qin Jiaxing and Fu Chun looked at each other. Yin Lan and the other girls looked at each other. They didn't expect Neo Yid to really know how to play the zither. In the cultivation world, there weren't many male cultivators who were willing to spend their time on this field. Of course, those who were passionate about it were mostly female cultivators. This was because women were born to be sentimental. The pair of eyes under the green veil stared closely at Yu Qianzhou's every move, and a faint look of expectation appeared in them. Yu Qianzhou stared at Fang Ming with a faint smile. His fingers touched the strings of the zither, and he began to play with it elegantly and skillfully. A beautiful melody slowly flowed into everyone's heart. He sang softly, "I am a fox that has cultivated for 1,000 years. 1,000 years of cultivation, 1,000 years of loneliness." Everyone was familiar with this song and the tune. However, it was clearly more emotional than Fang Ming's song. There were many subtle differences, but it was more provocative. Even if they didn't understand, they could tell that Nyo Yud's singing was better than Fang Ming's. This was a very normal thing. It was a song that was passed down from the mouth of Yu Qianzhou. It would be strange if Yu Qianzhou himself was not familiar with it. There were no recording devices in this era, so it wasn't a big deal if the song was lost. However, it showed everyone what an authentic song was. Fang Ming's face changed color. After playing and singing for a short while, Yu Qianzhou changed his tune midway. He sang again. Since the beginning, only the newlywed smile, who would hear the old cry. The word love is so hard. Should I ask for the truth, or should I pretend to be confused? It's hard to be content with knowing too much. The tune was so skillfully switched between the two songs, and it was so perfect and beautiful that it made people secretly fascinated. However, after a few more lines, the sound of the zither changed again. It was no longer affectionate and had become aggressive. Yu Qianzhou's 10 fingers strummed the zither strings as he stared at Fang Ming and said in an indifferent tone, "People strive to climb higher and water flows lower. If you want to climb higher and change your fate, no one will say anything. A fair lady is a gentleman's dream, and you're right. However, you're blind to think that everyone in the world is as gullible as fools. You're too naive. Fang Ming, if you have the guts to do it, you should be prepared to bear the consequences. If you admit that you're a liar now, I'll spare your life." Fang Ming glanced at the doubtful gazes around him and said unwillingly, "These are clearly the 2 songs that I played earlier. You made some slight changes to them, and you're calling me a liar? Who's the naive one here?" "Humph, I knew you would say that." Yu Qianzhou shook his head and sneered. With the movement of his fingers, the tune suddenly became impassioned, and the audience's mood became bolder. Yu Qianzhou stared at his fingers and said without looking up, "This is a song Yu Qianzhou composed for me. Not many people have heard it. On this lonely night, it's fate that we met. I'm willing to play this song for everyone free of charge. I'll sing this song to raise everyone's spirits." Hearing this, everyone's eyes lit up again, and they were filled with anticipation. Her red lips pursed under the green veil, which was a rare sight. "Fang Ming, I'll give you one last chance." Yu Qianzhou tilted his head and stared at him. Towards this guy who claimed that Yu Qianzhou was a peerless genius, Yu Qianzhou wanted to give him some face. However, it was better for him to show off his talent in front of beauty. Although Yu Qianzhou wasn't interested in the veiled beauty, it didn't stop him from satisfying his vanity. After all, there were few men who wouldn't be willing to be worshipped by beauty. This was also the main reason why he came out to sing for free, since he had nothing better to do. Moreover, he believed that the guy's singing skills were indeed inferior to his. Since he wanted to promote Yu Qianzhou as a peerless genius, he might as well let Nyo Yid do it for him. He was sure that the audience would be satisfied, and the peerless genius, Yu Qianzhou, would also be satisfied. However, the result of his action was that Fang Ming was doomed to be unlucky. However, Yu Qianzhou didn't like this guy who pretended to be cool, so he wouldn't help him. It was already good enough that he was willing to give Fang Ming a chance and a way out. Fang Ming sighed. It wasn't easy for him to get a chance to show off today. Why did he have to meet Nyo Yud, who appeared out of nowhere? Was this really his fate? Although he had a vague feeling that something was wrong, he was blinded by greed. He forced himself to be calm and said, True gold fears no fire, and justice is in the hearts of people. Chapter 539. He was stubborn, but his four brothers started to feel uneasy. To survive in the cultivation world until now, avoiding the strong and the weak was one of the rules of survival. This Niu Yud was obviously unfathomable. They couldn't understand why Fong Ming was so stubborn. Was it worth taking such a big risk? Justice exists in the hearts of people. Yu Qianzhou's fingers danced nonstop on the zither. He sneered and said, "If justice exists in the hearts of people, why would there be a distinction between the secular world and the cultivation world? Everyone has justice in their hearts, and there's no need for us to risk our lives fighting and killing. Every man for himself is the most suitable phrase to be used in the cultivation world." His words caused the bonfire to fall into silence. Only the sound of the zither could be heard. Everyone was reflecting on their past experiences in the cultivation world. Truly, every man for himself was the definition of every man for himself. Many people sighed softly and poured the strong liquor down their throats. Your way of thinking is too one-sided and extreme. For example, this old senior, Fong Ming, righteously waved his hand and pointed at the one-armed old man in the Leaning Mountain Pavilion. He said passionately, not to mention his profound cultivation base, he has been silently maintaining the Ghost Village for countless years. He has not allowed the Ghost Village to fall into ruins. He has also provided a place for us wandering cultivators to stay. Can you say that this old senior's actions are also every man for himself? Nice bootlicking. I hope he can save your life in the future. Yu Qianzhou glanced at him disdainfully and ignored him. His fingers danced on the zither, producing an infinitely melancholic tune. He looked around and said with a faint smile, "There's wine today, so let's get drunk today. When we meet again in the future, we will be passers-by. Niu Yud will present a song to relieve the boredom of fellow wandering cultivators." As soon as he finished speaking, his fingers suddenly danced wildly on the zither, producing a messy noise that made everyone's teeth go numb. Everyone looked at him with bared teeth. Just now, he was talking about warming people's hearts. Why did he turn into a disgusting person in the blink of an eye? Fong Ming frowned under the green veil. Fong Ming was secretly happy, so he was just pretending. Just when everyone's emotions were in a mess, the ear-piercing noise came to an abrupt end. Just as everyone relaxed and heaved a sigh of relief, a beautiful melody that was interwoven with ding-ding-dong-dong slowly entered everyone's hearts. It was like when one was unbearably hot in a hot summer and was suddenly wrapped in a cool and refreshing feeling. It made one heave a sigh of relief, and, at the same time, it was so comfortable that one could not help but want to let out a groan. As the sound of the zither gradually opened the hearts of the people, they heard Yu Qianzhou reciting in a bleak tone, "The winds and clouds of the world originate from my generation. Once I enter Jianghu, time flies. 1,000 years of cultivation, chatting and laughing, can't compare to a drunken life." The night breeze was cool, the bonfire was bright, and the crackling sound of the firewood could not pull everyone out of their trance. With just a few lines, everyone followed the melody and stepped into the turbulent cultivation world in an instant. The past was still vivid in their minds, and the rogue cultivators could not bear to look back. Complacency and frustration appeared before their eyes one by one, and how much blood and tears were mixed in them. How much did they give up, and how much did they gain? Did they give up more, or did they gain more? They did not know how long this dream would last. They also did not know if these years of hard searching were worth it. Can't compare to a drunken life. Many people casually muttered, then shook their heads with a bitter smile and sighed. How could they relieve their worries? Only the mellow and strong wine. The rogue cultivators sitting around the bonfire rose and fell with the prelude of the zither, and the cool wine went straight down their throats. For a moment, the fragrance of the wine wafted everywhere, making the night full of bonfire and confused but clear and worthy of eternal remembrance. Can't compare to a drunken life? Everyone knew that they could not be so free and easy. But tonight, they could get drunk. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing looked at Yu Qianqiu with their mouths wide open, as if they did not recognize him. Was this still the boss from before? They had followed Yu Qianqiu for a period of time, and they knew that this boss was cruel and merciless, and he would kill at the slightest provocation. Moreover, he often used vulgar words like father and mother. It was hard to imagine that he could say such words with deep meaning. Moreover, looking at his elegance and the romantic way he played the zither, it was quite scary. Are we hallucinating? Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing looked at each other in disbelief. Yan Lan and the other girl's eyes were full of little stars, and they were full of splendor. They all bent their knees and rested their chins on their hands, staring at him with their blurred eyes. This man could really make women fall for him. His eyes under the green veil. Although they were moving, they were as calm as before. But now, they were rippling as if a small stone had been thrown into a pool of stagnant water, and it made people's hearts fluctuate, and it was difficult to calm down. Fang Ming suddenly came to his senses, and he stared at Yu Qianqiu with an unpredictable expression. Yu Qianqiu, who was playing the zither, also gave him a disdainful look. That's right. Yu Qianqiu was indeed looking down on him. How dare you pretend to be elegant in front of me? Elegant is **T. It's only for people who have nothing better to do. Who has ever seen someone who can't even fill his stomach pretending to be elegant? Elegant. You son of a **TCH. I can do whatever I want, and I've already stopped playing. Today, I'll let you see what it means to pretend to be elegant. Playing the zither, singing, and reciting poems. Haven't you seen it before? This is called being overflowing with talent. Yu Qianqiu had deliberately played the zither before, and it wasn't just on a whim. Because everyone had already listened to a few songs, it was as if they had eaten too much delicious food, and now they were being served another delicious dish. If everyone wanted to taste the authentic taste, they would need a cup of plain water to wash away the residue on their taste buds, so that they wouldn't taste mixed. As for Yu Qianqiu's violent and random flicking, it was like a cup of tasteless plain water, completely washing away the lingering aftertaste in everyone's minds. After doing this, he began to show off proudly. He snatched this romantic night that belonged to Fang Ming into his own hands. While everyone was still sighing, they heard Yu Qianqiu reciting sonorously with the zither, riding on a sword to traverse heaven and earth. White bones fly like startled birds. The world is like a tide, and people are like water, but how many people return to the martial world? He added a slight sigh at the end, feeling a little sad about parting. The world is like a tide, and people are like water, but how many people return to the martial world? The rogue cultivators repeated it over and over again. Thinking back to when they first entered the cultivation world, everyone was still simple, and everyone had a few good friends, but who could survive? Even if they were still alive, who could still maintain that innocence? Deceiving each other to save their own lives. How many people returned to the martial world? Suddenly, someone stood up, threw the wine jar in his hand into the distance, and roared under the night sky. Cultivation world, you son of a bitch. That person gradually closed his eyes, and 2 streaks of tears slid down his beard, glowing under the light of the bonfire. This person was none other than the mid-stage nascent soul cultivator, Tian Yi. Perhaps he was thinking of his relatives and friends who no longer existed. The eyes of the 2 people beside him were also red, and they didn't say anything. They only knew how to pour the wine into their mouths. Next to the mountain pavilion, under the illumination of the incandescent lamp behind the green gauze curtain, her red lips moved slightly, and an almost inaudible voice came out. Riding on a sword to traverse heaven and earth, white bones fly like startled birds. The world is like a tide, and people are like water, but how many people return to the martial world? It seemed to be the first time this mysterious woman spoke. Her voice was mellow, like silver beads falling on a plate, crisp and pleasant to the ear. Unfortunately, the cultivation of the people below could not hear it. Only the old man behind her heard it. the one-armed old man slowly turned his head to look at Yu Qianshou, and his calm eyes were a little dim, as if he was peeling away the night sky and looking at the distant past. A burst of wild and carefree laughter suddenly sounded under the night sky, and the bonfire suddenly flickered. Everyone was startled and looked over, and it was Yu Qianshou laughing with his head facing the sky. The sound of the zither also became carefree and leisurely, and his 10 fingers were as bright as a blooming lotus, freely moving on the strings. The carefree and leisurely sound of the zither seemed to be warning everyone that since the past was unbearable to look back on, why not just let it go and laugh it off? The sound of the zither suddenly surged, and everyone's emotions fluctuated along with it. Suddenly, they heard Yu Qianshou sing loudly. The ocean laughs, the surging tides on both sides, floating and sinking with the waves, remembering the present. The heavens laughs, the tides of the world. Only God knows who wins and who loses. The rivers and mountains laugh. The misty rain is far away. The waves wash away the mortal world. How many do you know in the secular world? The cool breeze laughs, actually provoking loneliness. The heroic spirit is still there in the evening. La 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 la. The song surged in the wilderness. Although it was night, the moon was bright, and the stars were sparse, but everyone's state of mind was instantly brought into another world. Under the bright sky, laughing alone at the ups and downs of the ocean, laughing at the vicissitudes of life like floating clouds, fighting for fame and wealth like passing clouds. How many people in the cultivation world live in fear and anxiety? How can it be as carefree as watching the sunset with a wisp of cool breeze? Yu Qianshou's 10 fingers, the unrestrained singing, and the wild and hearty laughter dazzled Yan Lan and the other girls, and they couldn't help but fall into a trance. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing were dumbfounded, and they really suspected that their boss was possessed by something unclean. Inside the pavilion, the one-armed old man's cold eyes gradually melted. Beside the pavilion, the blue muslin on the bridle fluttered without any wind. The pair of eyes inside stared at Yu Qianshou, who was indulging himself. Her soft red lips moved slightly, and she murmured to herself, "The rivers and mountains laugh. The misty rain is far away." Is this a song composed by Yu Qianshou? The common people laugh, no longer lonely. The heroic spirit is still there. As Yu Qianshou sang, he couldn't help himself, and he gradually got into the mood. He seemed to be crazily singing to his heart's content. His wild and unrestrained manner really stirred people's hearts. Not to mention the others, they all swayed their upper bodies along with the song, and their flying swords clanked again. Together with the music, they sang along with Yu Qianshou. The ocean laughs, the surging tides on both sides, floating and sinking with the waves, remembering the present. This song was both heroic and catchy, suitable for these men to vent their emotions. After being led to sing a few times, they all sang very well. Under the night sky, beside the piles of bonfires, the fragrance of wine mixed with the wild singing drifted in the wilderness. The veiled woman beside the pavilion raised her flute and gently placed it next to her lips. Chapter 540. Woo woo, the flute sounded again. It floated in the night sky, but it was not as lonely as it was the first time. The melodious sound of the flute was intertwined with the music of the zither. The lingering sound of the wild and gentle accompaniment immediately enhanced the gentleness and heroism of the song. It vividly displayed the charm of laughing mountains and rivers, drifting in the misty rain. The night wind seemed to be stirred up as it blew towards them, fluttering their clothes and making the bonfire flicker. The music of the zither and the flute was perfect, and it was a rare song to be heard in the world. Yan Lan and the other girls' hair danced in the wind, but they still stared at Yu Qianshou, as if the lingering sound of the flute was also produced by the strings of the zither under his fingers. They didn't think that it was someone else who was playing the flute, because the flute's insertion point was just right. Those who were immersed in it felt that the music was even more beautiful and emotional. However, Yu Qianqiu noticed it. He kept playing the zither with his fingers to cooperate with the people who were singing loudly. He turned his head and looked at the veiled girl who was playing the flute beside the pavilion. The night wind came at the right time, wrapping around the mysterious girl's graceful figure. The green veil covering her face was blown up. Although her face was not exposed, half of her smooth and round forehead was already revealed. Yu Qianqiu stared at her, but he didn't know that the eyes under the green veil were also looking at him. Fingers plucking the strings and lips playing the flute, they cooperated so well. It was as if they had a telepathic connection, and their hearts were connected to each other. Everything was understood without words. A few strands of affection were quietly brewing in their eyes. Fong Ming was probably the only one among the rogue cultivators who wasn't immersed in it. He was slightly absent-minded, but he immediately woke up when he heard the flute. Now that he saw that the mysterious girl was playing the flute together with Niu Yud, he would be lying if he said he wasn't jealous. But what could he do about it? He could only keep it in his heart. Fong Ming's eyes fell on the four people who were singing loudly. He was hesitant, but then a trace of determination flashed across his eyes. With light footsteps, he slowly retreated to the periphery. He did not dare to move too much, wanting to leave before the crowd came back to their senses. It wasn't that he didn't want to call his four brothers to go with him, but he was afraid that it would alarm the others. If that happened, he wouldn't be able to escape at all. This was because he had given up the last chance that Niu Yud had given him. It wasn't like he was the one who started the practice of the cultivation world abandoning their peers to save their own lives. However, he had left a little too late. If he had left while Yu Qianqiu was still immersed in playing and singing, he might have really let him escape. But now that Yu Qianqiu was awake, with his cultivation, how could Fong Ming escape from under his nose? Yu Qianqiu glanced out of the corner of his eyes and caught sight of Fong Ming gradually retreating. His eyes narrowed and a cold smile appeared on his lips. Although he had done a lot of despicable things, he had never done something like abandoning his brothers. Ha! The sound of the zither rang out violently, startling the people who were singing loudly. They woke up with a start and looked at Yu Qianqiu. The gentle sound of the flute also stopped. Niu Yud stood up and threw the zither into his storage bag. He stared at a direction and said in a low voice, "Fong Ming, where do you think you're going?" Fong Ming stopped in his tracks and slowly turned around. He said nonchalantly, "Niu Yud, what do you mean by that? Do I have to tell you where I want to go? This is the ghost village, not your home. No matter how powerful you are, it's not up to you to make decisions here." Everyone's eyes focused on him. They were not idiots. Based on what had happened before, they naturally guessed that Fong Ming wanted to escape. His four brothers stared at him in silence. Their expressions were very complicated. "I don't make decisions about other things, and I'm too lazy to make decisions. But your life." Yu Qianqiu raised his hand and pointed at him. He said indifferently, "I gave you one last chance, but you didn't want it. The moment I played this song, your life no longer belonged to you." Fong Ming naturally wouldn't sit and wait for death. Even ants wanted to live, let alone humans. His chest heaved up and down as he said, "Niu Yud, who can prove that the song you're singing is definitely composed by Yu Qianqiu?" Everyone understood what he meant, but they could also tell that he was being shameless. At the very least, they all believed that the song was composed by Yu Qianqiu. "I've long guessed that you're not only a liar, but also a scoundrel," Yu Qianqiu said expressionlessly. "But I, Niu Yud, not only like to win people over with my virtue, I also like to be a ruthless judge. People like you deserve to die. I sentence you to death. What do you want?" Fong Ming was shocked. He originally thought that Niu Yud would have some misgivings in the ghost manner, so he was prepared to use his mouth. But looking at Niu Yud's expression, it seemed like he wanted to use force. Thus, he moved towards the mountain-leaning pavilion and said, "This is the ghost manor. It's not your turn to mess around." He looked at the one-armed old man for help. He also knew that Niu Yud's cultivation was higher than his, so he couldn't escape. He could only place his hope on the one-armed old man guarding the ghost manor. Oomph. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly. His body moved with a whoosh. He slid across the short grass on the ground, bypassing the campfires and the crowd, and directly approached Fong Ming. Amidst the clamor of the crowd, Fong Ming turned pale with fright and released a flying sword. He jumped on it and flew towards the mountain-leaning pavilion. His only chance of survival was there, so where else could he run to? But how could his nascent soul stage's speed be faster than Yu Qianqiu's? In an instant, the sound of something breaking through the air was getting closer. Fong Ming was scared out of his wits as he cried out in fear. "Senior, save me! Senior, save me! Young lady, save me!" His cry stopped abruptly. Yu Qianqiu leaped into the air and slapped his palm behind him. Fong Ming's body emitted a cloud of white smoke, which was quickly absorbed into Yu Qianqiu's palm. Immediately after, Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and unleashed a gust of astral wind. With a pu sound, Fong Ming instantly turned into dust. All the rogue cultivators were so shocked that they couldn't speak. They didn't even see what happened. Just 2 palms. 2 palms were enough to turn a nascent soul stage cultivator's bones into dust. Not even a piece of him could be seen. What kind of spell was this? It was too terrifying. Everyone didn't see it, but the veiled woman and the one-armed old man saw it clearly. Fong Ming was clearly turned into a dried-up skeleton by Niu Yud's palm, and then turned into dust by another palm. Absorbing stars, great technique. The veiled woman's delicate body slightly trembled. Her red lips under the azure veil murmured, "It really is him." If the first sentence was her by Yu Qianqiu, you would definitely be very surprised. Although it wasn't the first time he used the absorbing stars great technique, the number of people who knew about it could be counted on one hand. At least, no woman knew about it. After the one-armed old man clearly saw the power of this palm, his pupils rapidly shrank. There was no doubt in his eyes that he was shocked. After Fong Ming died, the flying sword under his feet still rushed towards the leaning mountain pavilion. The one-armed old man teleported in front of the veiled woman and conveniently grabbed the flying sword. Teleportation. Yu Qianqiu stared deeply at the one-armed old man. He had no intention of colliding with these 2 unknown people. His body turned in the air and immediately rushed towards Fong Ming's 4 brothers. After the 4 of them witnessed Fong Ming's tragic death, they were stunned. Suddenly, they realized that the person was rushing towards them. They were so scared that they immediately jumped up and ran. However, just as the 4 of them jumped up, they discovered that they were already surrounded by a qi dynamic. Yu Qianqiu flew backward in the air and slammed his palm toward the 4 people below. For streams of white smoke rushed into his palm with a whooshing sound. Since he had already made his move, he didn't mind carrying the crime of killing the innocent. He wanted to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. Everyone raised their heads and saw the 4 sounds of the palm. Suddenly, they heard a rushing sound that pierced through the air. He turned around and saw that the one-armed old man in the leaning mountain pavilion had made a move. Fong Ming's flying sword left his hand, leaving behind a magnificent silver light. It was accompanied by the faint sound of wind and thunder as it shot toward Yu Qianqiu, who was in midair. A strong wind followed the flying sword, and wherever it went, the bonfire would be extinguished. The people below felt their faces hurt from the strong wind. From the looks of it, the 2 experts were about to fight. No one dared to sit still. It wouldn't be fun if they got caught in the crossfire. They scattered like birds and beasts. They didn't even have time to hide. Even if they wanted to watch the show, they had to stay far away. Yu Qianqiu had just finished off the 4 people with 1 palm strike when he saw the flying sword coming towards him. In an instant, it was right in front of him. When the flying sword was still a few meters away, the strong wind had already hit him. He almost couldn't stand still in the air. He was shocked. This old man's cultivation was so high. Without another word, he leaped into the air again, activating the metal art. He slapped the flying sword that had just brushed past him. Bang! The flying sword that was wrapped in the strong wind could no longer withstand the pressure. It exploded into a cloud of silver dust and flew everywhere. The bonfire below was extinguished by the wind, and the 4 dried corpses turned into dust on the spot. Under the green veil, the black eyebrows slightly furrowed. It was understandable that Yu Qianqiu killed Fong Ming, but he didn't even let the 4 people go. She couldn't stand it anymore. She had been merciful all her life and hated killing the innocent. The one-armed old man's eyes flickered when he saw that his flying sword had been reduced to dust by Yu Qianqiu's palm. A fearless battle intent gradually overflowed from his body as he stared at Yu Qianqiu. The ghost manor didn't allow people to cause trouble. However, Fong Ming had offended someone he shouldn't have, so he didn't stop Niu Yud from killing Fong Ming. However, after Niu Yud killed Fong Ming, he turned around and killed 4 people. He simply didn't respect the Ghost Manor's guardian at all. Since he broke the rules here, he naturally had to teach him a lesson. However, he didn't expect Niu Yud to be able to shatter the flying sword he released with one palm strike. Moreover, it was shattered. This cultivation was quite frightening. He was confident that he could also easily shatter a normal flying sword with one palm strike. However, it was impossible for him to shatter a flying sword into dust. He now suspected that Niu Yud was a soul formation stage expert who was hiding his identity and purposely came to cause trouble. This was because even he couldn't see through Niu Yud's cultivation. One could only imagine Niu Yud's cultivation. For a moment, his battle-intent soared. However, just as he slowly moved half a step, he suddenly heard a soft sigh. The voice transmitted, "Forget it. This person's background isn't simple. He also has a deep relationship with Nongzhu. Let him go." "Miss, do you know this person?" The one-armed old man was startled. He transmitted his voice back. "Who is he?" Chapter 541. "If I'm not wrong, he's Yu Qianqiu." The mysterious woman transmitted her voice. "He's Yu Qianqiu? How can he have such a high cultivation?" However, his ruthless style of doing things is similar to that fella in the legends. The one-armed old man said in disbelief. Yu Qianqiu has been the person that the loose cultivators talked about the most during this period of time. To think that he dared to come here under such circumstances. He's quite bold. What's real and what's fake? I wonder which one is the real one, the mysterious woman muttered. "Miss, what did you say?" The one-armed elder asked in surprise. He didn't understand what she meant. She just said that this person was Yu Qianqiu. Why couldn't she tell the real one from the fake one now? Yu Qianqiu hovered in the air and narrowed his eyes at the one-armed elder. He was prepared to fight. What made him wary was that he didn't know how high this mysterious elder's cultivation was. When the other party casually swung out his sword, there was a faint sound of wind and thunder. This was something he had never seen before, even when fighting against cultivators at the late tribulation stage. Could this old fellow be at the soul formation stage? Yu Qianqiu was slightly alarmed. He secretly locked onto Utopia with his divine sense. If he couldn't do it, he would leave. What surprised him was that after the one-armed elder attacked, he only looked at him deeply before turning and retreating to the side. As for the mysterious veiled woman, she leisurely rose into the air like Chong, flying to the moon. When she rose into the air, the veil on her head tilted slightly. Yu Qianqiu could clearly sense that the woman was looking at him. Following that, a green figure disappeared into the night sky. What was this woman's background? And what was the relationship between the one-armed elder and them? Yu Qianqiu couldn't figure it out. In the pavilion, the one-armed elder was drinking alone under the incandescent lamp. He was holding the wine jar that Yu Qianqiu had given him. It was as if nothing had happened. "Damn it! If I had known earlier, I would have poisoned the wine and let you drink slowly." Yu Qianqiu gnashed his teeth in hatred. He thought to himself, "Old man, don't be so smug. This wine isn't that tasty." Floating in the air, he transmitted his voice to Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing. "Go back." His figure immediately shot into the ghost manor. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing glanced at each other. Previously, Boss had said that he was in the core formation stage, but later on, it was shown that his cultivation level was far higher than that. The fact that he could fly in the air was proof enough. Now, he simply used the voice transmission technique, which could only be done by cultivators at the early stage of the crossing calamity stage. The two of them were a little excited because with the protection of such an expert, ordinary people in the cultivation world wouldn't dare to touch them in the future. This was equivalent to a big backer. The two of them did not dare to hesitate and quickly chased after him on their swords. Yin Lan and the other girls nodded and followed him. The rogue cultivators in the surroundings looked at each other. They never expected that someone would dare to make a move in the ghost manner. Someone asked, "Who knows the two rogue cultivators following Yo Yid? I think I've seen them somewhere before." The taller one is called Fu Chun, and the shorter one is called Qin Jiaxing. They're just small fries in the foundation building stage. TSK. What kind of dodge *T luck did these two fellows run into? They actually managed to find such a powerful backer. Another person replied. Everyone who was listening revealed an envious expression. They were very, very envious, not just envious. Although the identity of a cultivator in a famous sect had many benefits, and everyone was eager to join it. However, the founders of those famous sects were almost all rogue cultivators. Moreover, they were talented rogue cultivators. There was no other reason. Most of the cultivators who came from sects followed the cultivation methods of their sects step by step. Within the framework drawn by their ancestors, very few could surpass their ancestors. Although the life of a rogue cultivator was hard and tiring, those talented rogue cultivators were different. They all relied on their extremely high talent to walk a path that belonged to them. Only then could they establish their own sects and compete with the cultivators in the world. Among the top 10 cultivators in the world, which one of them wasn't a rogue cultivator? Among the rogue cultivators, they had never heard of someone named Yo Yid. However, judging from his powerful skills in various situations today, he might also be a talented rogue cultivator. To be able to follow such a person, once he established his own sect, the person who followed him would definitely have an extraordinary status in the sect. How could those rogue cultivators who had attached themselves to famous sects and clans compare to them? That was why everyone envied Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing. If they could befriend each other now, they might have a way out in the future. What surprised Yu Qianshou was that the ruthless magistrate that he casually mentioned became Yo Yid's nickname. Moreover, because of his fight with the one-armed old man, it didn't take long for the news to spread throughout the cultivation world. Returning to the small courtyard with 6 rooms, Yu Qianshou sent the 6 girls away and called Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing to his room. Seeing that he was serious, the two of them couldn't help but look at each other. They didn't know why their boss was looking for them. Yu Qianshou took out 2 storage bags and threw them to the two of them. The two of them caught the bags and looked at each other. Then they immediately injected their divine senses into the bags. If they didn't look, they wouldn't know. Once they saw it, they were shocked. Their eyes widened and they couldn't speak. There were so many spirit stones in the bags. For them, it was indeed a lot. They had never seen so many spirit stones in their lives. The two of them looked at Yu Qianshou in confusion. They didn't know why he gave them so many spirit stones. There are 2 million top-grade spirit stones in each storage bag. It's enough for you to use. Yu Qianshou smiled. For us. The two of them asked almost at the same time. Don't worry. Yu Qianshou took out 2 purple, true restriction-breaking pills and threw them to the two of them. It's your luck that you met me. Today, I'll help you break through to the early stage of tribulation passing. The two of them were dumbfounded. They thought they had heard wrong. Cultivation was about progressing step by step. The two of them were only in the middle stage of foundation establishment. How could they break through to the early stage of tribulation passing? Don't doubt me. Yu Qianshou pointed at the purple spirit pills in their hands and said, the spirit pills in your hands are called restriction-breaking pills. They were made according to a recipe passed down from ancient times. Because the spirit herbs needed to make them are extremely difficult to gather, they have never appeared in the cultivation world. That's why very few people know about them. Although the two of them didn't have high cultivation levels, when they saw the halo on the spirit pills, they were a bit confused. Just by looking at the quality of the spirit pills, it was obvious that they were made by a top-notch alchemist. A normal alchemist would have a hard time making spirit pills with a halo. Fu Chun held in her hands and said excitedly, "Boss, do you mean that this restriction-breaking pill can increase a person's cultivation level?" Qin Jiaxing smelled the fragrance of the spirit pills obsessively. Take the spirit pills, catalyze the medicinal properties, and then absorb the spiritual energy inside the spirit stones. When the time comes, you will know if I'm telling the truth. Yu Qianqiu raised his hand and said, "Give it a try." Yes, yes. The two of them nodded. They were so excited that they didn't know what to say. Without hesitation, they stuffed the spirit pills into their mouths and sat down cross-legged to regulate their breathing. The two of them didn't have the slightest doubt because they felt that their boss had no reason to harm them. Moreover, with their status, neither of them was worth 2 million high-grade spirit stones. Spending 4 million high-grade spirit stones to harm insignificant people like them would be more likely to be crazy. With their boss's cultivation level, it would be easy for him to kill them. There was no need to go through so much trouble. Not long after, the two of them started to turn red. Hot air came out of their mouths and noses. They couldn't help but tremble. They looked like they were in pain. Yu Qianqiu said in a low voice, "Hurry up and absorb the spirit stones." The two of them trembled and quickly took out the spirit stones from their storage pouches to absorb the spirit stones. One after another. Not long after, the painful expression on their faces became comfortable. At the same time, there was a hint of surprise, as if they enjoyed this feeling. 2 hours later, the two of them opened their eyes one after another. They looked at each other and jumped up. Qin Jiaxing stammered, I broke through to the late stage of foundation establishment. Fu Chun was also excited. Me too. Calm down. What will make you excited is yet to come. Yu Qianqiu sat on a chair and said disapprovingly. He placed 2 piles of spirit pills on the side table. In each pile were 7 purple limit-breaking pills and 3 colorful spirit pills with a halo of a rainbow-colored pill. The latter was the 7 Treasures pill made from the rainbow-colored Lingji. It was the best spirit pill for breaking through bottlenecks. From foundation establishment to core formation, nascent soul, and tribulation passing stage, there are 3 bottlenecks. These 3 rainbow-colored spirit pills are rare spirit pills for breaking through bottlenecks. You can take 1 for each bottleneck. Yu Qianqiu smiled and knocked on the table. Each of you take 1 pile. It should help you break through to the early stage of tribulation passing stage. Damn it, I have spirit stones and spirit pills. Don't let me down. The two of them were so excited that they didn't know what to say. Happiness came too suddenly. They never thought such a good thing could happen. They thought they were dreaming. Fu Chun took a deep breath and bowed. Fu Chun will obey your orders from now on. Then she calmly took the 10 spirit pills that belonged to her. Qin Jiaxing stared blankly for a moment before he quickly bowed and saluted. Qin Jiaxing will definitely listen to boss's instructions from now on. Then he quickly took the pills on the tea table. Yu Qianqiu smiled and didn't say anything. He raised his hand and gestured for them to continue. The two of them looked at each other and stood side by side. They bowed to him again and continued to take the spirit pills to absorb the spirit qi. After the two of them closed their eyes, Yu Qianqiu's face became expressionless, and his fingers tapped on the surface of the coffee table. The purple restriction-breaking pill that the two of them had consumed was the same as the one that most of the members of Utopia had consumed. It could rapidly raise one's cultivation to the early stage of tribulation passing. The only flaw of this pill was that although it could help speed up cultivation, the person who took this pill would only be able to reach the late stage of tribulation passing stage. There is almost no hope of breaking through to the soul formation stage. The white restriction breaking pill could avoid this flaw, but there was another flaw. Every time they took one, they would be stiff and unable to move for a month. If the two of them took the white restriction breaking pill, they would need at least 8 months to break through to the early stage of tribulation passing stage. What he lacked the most right now was time. It was urgent. Chapter 542. Jumping out of the Chinese cultivation world was a hasty decision. At first, he was worried that he had made the wrong move. But now, he could confidently tell himself that this trip was worth it. He learned many things he didn't know. It also gave him a very serious sense of crisis. Looking at the problem from this perspective, he had a lot of feelings about the overall situation of the cultivation world. Previously, when he made a ruckus in the closed Chinese cultivation world, he was indeed a frog at the bottom of a well. The outside world was very vast and spectacular. There were indeed many experts in the cultivation world. There were many things that the Chinese cultivation world couldn't come into contact with. Combining the situation of the Chinese cultivation world and the countries here, he could now say with certainty that the Chinese cultivation world was definitely not a match for the combined forces of the various countries. Not to mention the soul formation experts, just the final stage tribulation passing experts alone were countless. The various countries didn't even use their true strength in the war against the Chinese cultivation world. Why was it like this? Yu Qianzhou felt a lingering fear just thinking about it. It was obvious that they were waiting for something, for Bai Chongqun to go to the Eastern Holy Land. Yu Qianzhou now truly understood Master Bai Chongqun's position in the cultivation world. As long as Bai Chongqun was still in the cultivation world, the entire world wouldn't be chaotic. Perhaps Bai Chongqun only needed a glance to scare all the experts in the world into trembling with fear. No one would dare to move. In Baikong's cultivation was high, right? The World Commerce Association's power was great, right? He still kept a low profile, afraid of angering a certain someone. Even if he didn't say anything and just watched coldly from the Demon Ghost region. Whether it was this late-stage soul formation expert or that late-stage soul formation expert, who would dare to use the full strength of their country to attack the Chinese cultivation world. No one dared to step forward. That #1 expert in the world definitely didn't blink when he killed people. His iron-blooded methods had already deterred the entire world. Who could make all the soul formation experts in the world obediently gather together with just one word? Thinking about it, it could only be Bai Chongqun. Yu Qianzhou even suspected that the so-called EC War was just his master deliberately trying to scare those so-called experts. Because the rumors of the star bead appeared too suddenly, the experts from various countries were all restless. At that time, Bai Chongqun went on a killing spree and killed more than 10 deity transformation stage experts in a row. Immediately, everyone was so frightened that they didn't dare to act blindly without thinking, and all of them became well-behaved. Just to prevent soul formation experts from interfering in the war, if it was before he came to the various countries, Yu Qianzhou might have believed this saying. But now, he didn't believe it. Did Bai Chongqun not know the strength of each country? Even if the soul formation experts didn't intervene, the Chinese cultivation world wouldn't be a match for the combined forces of the various countries. Wouldn't the Battle of the East Sea be unnecessary? Bai Chongqun shouldn't be such a boring person, right? Why didn't the other countries attack the Chinese cultivation world? They only sent people to test the waters. Clearly, Bai Chongqun's threat in the East Sea was effective. Although he said that the other soul formation cultivators wouldn't intervene, he wouldn't intervene either. However, he had shown that he wanted to protect the Chinese cultivation world. Who would dare to bite the bullet and come? Wouldn't that be courting death? Yu Qianzhou now had a bold guess. The rumor about the star orb came so suddenly that Bai Chongqun didn't seem to expect it. But he suddenly gathered all the soul formation experts in the world to threaten them. But he didn't invite the second strongest expert in the world, Wen Lanfeng. When he was about to leave the Monster Ghost region, and there was no successor for the torture envoy, he left Wen Lanfeng behind. Could it be that the old man decided to let Wen Lanfeng inherit the position of the torture envoy of the Monster Ghost region? Thinking back to the last time at the Baiwan embassy in Dayang City, Nongzhu had told Wen Rui why Bai Chongqun didn't invite Wen Lanfeng to the EC. However, Nongzhu hesitated and didn't explain it. It seemed that there was some hidden reason. Judging from this, the possibility was very high. In the cultivation world, apart from Bai Chongqun, It seemed that only Wen Lanfeng could intimidate the heroes of the world. However, his sudden appearance seemed to have changed by Changchun's mind. He, who had never accepted disciples, accepted him as his disciple. Furthermore, he had already hinted that he would be the next torture enforcer. Did Bai Changchun think that his achievements in the future would be higher than Wen Lanfeng's? Even Yu Qianzhou didn't believe this reason. He was an expert at the late soul formation stage. He thought about it until his scalp went numb. He couldn't figure out what the old man wanted, so he simply stopped thinking about it. Maybe he was worrying too much. Master didn't have so many plans at all. Otherwise, he would have killed all the soul formation experts. But he was very sure of one thing. Master was determined to go to the Holy East Land. Once he left the cultivation world, all the countries would definitely join forces to attack the cultivation world of Huaxia. Not only the cultivation world, but the secular world would also experience a great calamity. A war to divide the interests of Huaxia was inevitable. At that time, the world would be in chaos. After understanding the general situation, Yu Qianzhou calculated that it would not be long before his master left for the Eastern Holy Land. He immediately felt that he was pressed for time. There was only 1 or 2 years left, which was nothing for the long life of a cultivator. But for him, it was really urgent. In 1 or 2 years, once the cultivation world of Huaxia was defeated, if he didn't have enough strength to operate in the cultivation world and support Shi Wenguang's army would be the first to bear the brunt. Although the cultivation world wouldn't directly intervene, if the armies of hundreds of countries joined forces, no matter how good Shi Wenguang was at fighting, it would be hard for him to deal with them. His years of hard work would go down the drain. Yu Qianzhou sat on the chair and smiled bitterly. To be honest, before leaving the cultivation world of Huaxia, he didn't care much about who won or lost. But now, for the sake of his own interests, he couldn't let the cultivation world of Huaxia defeat them. He had to help them even if he didn't want to. Regardless of what his master was thinking, he had to prepare for a rainy day and make preparations just in case. In the next 1 or 2 years, he had to weaken the strength of the countries as much as possible. Thinking of this, he took out a red spirit pill and played with it in his hand. When he first refined the pseudo-limit-breaking pill, it was prepared for the Daoyuo sect. But now, it seemed that the Daoyuo sect was a force that couldn't be ignored in the cultivation world of Huaxia, so there was no hurry to deal with them. This pseudo-limit-breaking pill might have to be used on someone else. As he pondered, he sat on the chair until the next day, when Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing forcefully increased their cultivation to the early stage of the tribulation passing stage. The two of them stood up excitedly. Roar! They couldn't help but let out 2 clear roars, causing the room to buzz. Under the grapevines outside, the 6 women were wondering why the 3 men were hiding in the room for an entire day. Could it be that they were gay? When they suddenly heard the 2 clear roars, their expressions changed. From the deafening roars, they could tell that the cultivation of the 2 people who made the sounds was much higher than theirs. When did other people enter the room? In the ghost manner, many wandering cultivators looked over. Yu Qianzhou leaned back on the chair and looked at the 2 of them with half-open eyes. He smiled slightly. It was understandable how the 2 of them felt. Anyone who spent a day to break through from the foundation establishment stage to the tribulation passing stage would be overjoyed. They had seen many similar things in Utopia. Of course, it was a good thing, but what the 2 of them didn't know was that they basically had no chance of breaking through to the soul formation stage in this lifetime. He didn't know if the 2 of them would have other thoughts after they found out. Therefore, Yu Qianzhou didn't tell the 2 of them about the drawbacks of the purple limit-breaking pill. Yu Qianzhou knew that he might be a little unreasonable, but his way of thinking might be a little cruel to others. His reasoning was very simple. The 2 of them were wandering cultivators with mediocre aptitudes. If they hadn't met him in this chaotic cultivation world, what chance would they have of increasing their cultivation to the early stage of the tribulation passing stage in this lifetime? The chance was probably 0, not to mention cultivating to the soul formation stage. That's right, he wanted to use the 2 of them, so he took out a few million spirit stones to increase their cultivation to the tribulation passing stage. However, Yu Qianqiu thought that this was an opportunity for them. Others might not have this opportunity. Some things might make people unhappy if they were too clear about it. For their own good, his own good, and mine, it was better to hide it. He thought that this kind of concealment was rational and kind. How's the effect? Are there any adverse effects on your body? Check it carefully. Yu Qianqiu leaned his arm on the tea table, his head half propped up as he smiled. The two of them nodded and quickly checked their bodies. Apart from the damage caused by forcefully increasing their cultivation, they were fine. Boss, there's no problem. Fu Chun clenched her fists and said excitedly. Never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that such a day would come. Boss, there's no problem with me either. Qin Jiaxing kept rubbing his face with his palms. He was indescribably excited. Yu Qianqiu nodded and smiled as he looked at the two of them, checking their cultivation. After a while, the two of them calmed down a little. Fu Chun brought the storage bag over respectfully and said, Boss, there's still about 800,000 high-grade spirit stones. Qin Jiaxing didn't dare to keep it to himself and brought it over respectfully. Yu Qianqiu sat up straight and waved his hand with a smile. I'm an early-stage tribulation-passing cultivator now. I'm no longer a poor itinerant cultivator. How can I not have some money? Keep it for yourself. The two of them were a little embarrassed. Qin Jiaxing scratched his head and giggled. This was happiness. In the past, they were just poor itinerant cultivators. I still stand by my words. As long as you follow me sincerely, I guarantee that you'll have a good life. Yu Qianqiu stood up and patted their shoulders. Let me do things well. Good days are yet to come. The two of them didn't know what to say. They just kept nodding and giggling. After I made my move last night, I'm sure many itinerant cultivators will come to fawn over you. Yu Qianqiu walked around the two of them and said, if they find out that you're early-stage tribulation-passing cultivators, they'll be even more envious. You could tell everyone about the limit-breaking pill. Chapter 543. Both of them were shocked. Although their previous cultivation levels were low, they were still clear about one thing. If such a treasure was made public, it would probably cause great trouble. Boss, you have to think twice. Fu Chun cupped her hands and advised earnestly. This limit-breaking pill is really too magical. Once outsiders know about it, I'm afraid all the cultivators in the world will flock to snatch it. Just like that Yu Qianqiu, because of these two treasured sabers, ended up being chased and robbed by cultivators from various countries. That's right. Qin Jiaxing nodded repeatedly and said very sincerely, Boss, this kind of thing really can't be leaked. Such a precious treasure will really bring about a fatal disaster. I'm not afraid of the itch when I'm covered with lice. Yu Qianqiu smiled self-deprecatingly and waved his hand at the two who didn't understand, saying, just do as I say. Nothing will happen. The two looked at each other and showed expressions of listening attentively. After all, they had just said that they would obey his orders. If they were to be long-winded, they would be suspected of being disobedient. Moreover, the two of them were now quite convinced of this boss. Who in the world could raise the cultivation level of a foundation establishment cultivator to the tribulation passing stage in one day? They didn't know whether others had this ability or not. In any case, they had never heard of it. Such a miraculous method, coupled with his powerful skills and mysterious origin, made the two of them fear and respect him. Yu Qianqiu was very satisfied with their performance and said slowly, if someone asks you about the improvement of your cultivation level, it's okay for you to disclose the limit-breaking pill. Just say that I'm going to make a lot of it, and on the day of the Treasure Basin gathering, I will sell it to the cultivators in the world. Of course, some things can't be said completely. What could be said and what could not be said, he carefully explained to the two of them. After figuring it out, the two of them looked at each other. They didn't know what the boss was going to do, but it wasn't good for them to ask, so they promised to do as he said. At this moment, the room suddenly darkened, and there was a faint sound of thunder in the sky outside. Yu Qianqiu's expression changed slightly. He glanced at the two of them and quickly opened the door and walked out. Yin Lan and the other girls were looking around the courtyard. When they saw Yu Qianshou coming out, they all bowed and greeted him, Mr. Yu Qianshou waved his hand at them and looked up into the sky. Dark clouds were rolling overhead, and there were lightning bolts intertwining in the sky. Lightning snakes flickered in and out of the dark clouds. This was especially true for the area above their heads, where the clouds were as black as ink and lightning snakes were flashing. The 6 girls looked at each other. They had seen this phenomenon many times in the Misty Rain Tower. Yin Lan said in surprise, "It's a tribulation cloud. Could it be that someone is going through a tribulation in this ghost manor?" When Qin Jiaxing and Fu Chun heard this, their expressions changed. Of course, they knew who was going to undergo the tribulation. The former asked fearfully, "Boss, what should we do?" The 2 of them had never experienced such a scene before, so they were more or less afraid. They couldn't help but ask their boss for help. It's not a big deal to go through the tribulation in the early stage. Yu Qianshou had seen many people go through the tribulation in Utopia, so he was already used to it. There was indeed nothing to be afraid of in the early stage. Even if he was going through the tribulation himself, although he was struck by lightning and fainted, he could just sleep in a daze and muddle through it. It was nothing. Let's go into the mountain. It's big enough there. Yu Qianshou flew towards the back of the mountain. The 2 of them didn't dare to hesitate and quickly followed him. Seeing that Qin Jiaxing and Fu Chun could actually fly in the air, coupled with what the 3 of them said just now, the 6 girls were so shocked that their jaws dropped. After a while, Yin Xia stammered, Could it be that Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing are going through the tribulation? How? How is this possible? It wasn't just the 6 of them. Many people in the Ghost Manor were also looking at the sky and wondering who was going through the tribulation. When they suddenly saw Qin Jiaxing and Fu Chun flying in the air, they all rubbed their eyes, thinking that they were seeing things. After asking the people around them, they realized that it was very likely to be true. How is this possible? Many people flew into the air, wanting to follow them to see what was going on. In the next few days, Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing, whose cultivations had risen to the early stage of tribulation passing, had a comfortable life. The 2 of them arrogantly scurried around the Ghost Manor, accepting the flattery of the loose cultivators. Although they were going around to complete the task given by their boss, the feeling of being flattered by everyone made the 2 of them feel a little complacent. They didn't know who they were anymore. Yu Qianshou really couldn't stand it anymore. Their morals. Naturally, he had to pour some cold water on them to wake them up. He seriously warned the 2 of them. The 2 of them had only reached the early stage of tribulation passing, and their real strength was still far from the early stage of tribulation passing. If any powerful early stage nascent soul cultivator couldn't stand the sight of you, they would definitely kill you. Don't be too arrogant. Yu Qianshou's words weren't alarmist words. How could a cultivator who had risen to the early stage of tribulation passing in a day compare to a cultivator who had cultivated for 100 years or even hundreds of years? Not to mention the profoundness of their cultivation arts. Just their actual combat strength alone was a world of difference. A slightly stronger early-stage nascent soul cultivator wouldn't have a problem killing them. The level of one's cultivation didn't necessarily determine one's strength. This wasn't just a saying. Yu Qianshou understood this very well. Precisely because he understood this, the members in Utopia who had forcefully raised their cultivation were forced to continuously train with all their might. This was so that when they faced actual combat, they would be able to minimize the number of casualties to the greatest extent. After being reprimanded, the 2 of them knew that their boss wasn't lying. After their minds became clearer, they restrained themselves a lot. In these few days, the ruthless magistrate Niu Yid would also walk around the Ghost Manor every day. At the same time, the cultivation world's butcher, Yu Qianshou, would often appear around the fog forest. The secret of entering and leaving the fog forest. As a result, many cultivators were attracted over. However, a butcher was a butcher, and those who were unlucky enough to encounter him rarely managed to escape alive. When a large number of people rushed over, everyone could only watch as he escaped into the fog forest. There was nothing they could do about him. Once everyone relaxed, this fellow became energetic again. Without anyone noticing, he would sneak out to commit crimes. He killed a few people here and there, causing those who suffered losses to want to pull out his tendons and skin him alive. However, this fellow was even more slippery than a loach, and it was very difficult to catch him. At the most, more than 50 late-stage tribulation transcendence experts trapped him in a valley. However, in the end, no one could figure out what was going on. Everyone searched everywhere, but they still couldn't find him. In the end, he still managed to slip away. Then, he turned around and appeared somewhere else. He charged into a group of nascent soul cultivators and slaughtered them, killing nearly 100 people in one go. When more than 50 late-stage tribulation transcendence experts rushed over to help, that fellow ran away again. The cultivators of the various countries were filled with hatred. They looked at the heavens speechlessly. They gritted their teeth so hard that they were about to shatter, and they almost burst into tears. So many experts couldn't catch an early-stage tribulation transcendence expert. Furthermore, he often appeared right under their noses. This group of people had lost all their face. Yuchincho's strategy was very effective in dealing with this group of people. To sum it up, the enemy was tired, I would disturb. The enemy was strong, I would retreat. The enemy chased, I would run. If anyone was careless, I would be ruthless. Just when Yuchincho was causing quite a stir among the various countries, a ruthless judge, Niu Yud, suddenly appeared in the Jinshan country's ghost village. This person's appearance more or less stole the limelight from the butcher Yuchincho. The experts of various countries temporarily stopped dealing with Yuchincho and focused their attention here. Ordinary cultivators in the cultivation world didn't know who the one-armed old man of the ghost village was, but the higher-ups of the various countries knew. This Niu Yud was actually able to shatter the one-armed old man's flying sword with one palm strike. Furthermore, he had shattered it into powder. It was truly unbelievable. When did such an expert appear in the cultivation world? What shocked them the most was that this Niu Yud was actually able to forcibly raise the cultivation of two foundation establishment stage loose cultivators to the early stage of tribulation passing within a day. Many people had seen it with their own eyes. This was simply too inconceivable. Limit-breaking pill. Limit-breaking pill. Limit-breaking pill. What a distant word. It was so distant that people had almost forgotten about it. Legend had it that during the chaotic battles of ancient times, a capable person with special abilities had refined a very overbearing spirit pill in order to gain the upper hand in the battle. It could forcibly raise the cultivation of the cultivators under him to the tribulation passing stage in a short period of time. This was only a legend. As for what exactly was going on, no one knew. They had only vaguely heard that this spirit pill was called the limit-breaking pill. Niu Yud could actually refine the limit-breaking pill. It was said that he could also refine it in large quantities and was even preparing to sell it at the cornucopia gathering in the future. This news was even more shocking than him, shattering the one-armed old man's flying sword. Just think about it. Which of the various countries' soul formation experts didn't have 1,000 or 800 cultivators under their command? Those with great powers even had tens of thousands of cultivators under their command. There were even some that had close to 100,000 cultivators under their command. For example, in Baikong's World Chamber of Commerce. The World Chamber of Commerce had more than 100,000 disciples. Although it was a mix of good and bad, and most of them had low cultivation. But what if they had the limit-breaking pill? 100,000 tribulation passing experts. Oh my God. Just thinking about it made people's blood boil. The headquarters of the World Chamber of Commerce, Cornucopia, God of Wealth Peak. On the God of Wealth Peak, the wind and clouds surged, causing people's clothes to flutter. At this time, the three people's emotions were the same, making it impossible for them to calm down. In Baikong, dressed in a black robe, stood tall on the peak of the mountain. No matter how strong the wind caused his robe to flutter, he didn't move an inch. His eyes were like an eagle's as he stared in the direction of the Golden Mountain country. However, under his slightly shriveled cheeks, one could clearly see his muscles twitching nonstop. It was obvious that his heart wasn't as calm as it looked. Sikong Ju and Jing Yuankong silently stood behind their master. Limit-breaking pill. Sikong Ju's eyes flickered. As Im Baikong's head disciple, he had followed his master for the longest time. At the same time, he was also his master's most trusted disciple. Some things were secrets between master and disciple. Sikong, is the news reliable? Im Baikong asked without turning his head. Sikong Ju respectfully replied, "We have planted our spies in the ghost manor. They saw it with their own eyes, so it shouldn't be wrong." Im Baikong slightly nodded his head with his back facing the two. His voice was still calm as he said, "Sikong, let's put the other matters aside for now. Pick enough capable people and personally go to the Golden Mountain Country. That you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.